Chapter 878. While the roar of the diesel engine shook the sky, the waves were also broken by the speedboat that was traveling at high speed on the sea, leaving snow-white traces on the rolling sea. Among the undulating speedboats, many pairs of eyes were staring in a certain direction. They seemed to be searching for something. However, in the face of the vast sea, humans who could only rely on their naked eyes to search for anything that could possibly appear on the surface of the sea were so powerless. Fortunately, there were two warships built with the most advanced human technology on top of these speedboats that were speeding on the surface of the sea as aerial observation platforms to support the speedboats. Searcher 1 and 3. There is an abnormal signal 800 meters to your left. Please go and check it out. Searcher 4 and 8. There is an abnormal flow of water 300 meters to your right. Please get as close as possible and release a buoy to monitor it. Searcher 9. All sorts of instructions from the two warships rang out on the communication channel, guiding the speedboats that were braving the wind and the waves to proceed with the next step of the search. Looks like things have calmed down. On the communication screen, Talia heaved a sigh of relief. Half an hour ago, the Aubrey soldiers who had witnessed their homeland being drowned by a 10,000-meter tsunami and were lucky enough to avoid this life and death crisis did not show much emotion at first. However, that was only on the surface. The moment the Obu archipelago was submerged, fear and helplessness had been planted deep in the hearts of the Obu soldiers, who were fortunate enough to escape to the Danu children and the Minerva. They were ready to explode at any moment. And this seed only needed a subtle opportunity to germinate and grow, igniting the deep fear in the hearts of these Aubrey soldiers who had been through so many life and death crises and had yet to truly get a chance to breathe. As an experienced captain, Talia naturally understood this point. Unfortunately, the Minerva did not have someone like Lux Klein who could easily soothe the emotions of others with words. Therefore, as the atmosphere and the children of Dan's slaves gradually stabilized, the anomaly that Talia was worried about also occurred on the Minerva. Fortunately, the anomaly that Talia was worried about was finally passed without any mishaps. And the person who resolved this crisis was coincidentally Real Flying Bird. I didn't expect Real Flying Bird to have the talent to be an orator. Ray Minkai, who knew the whole story, couldn't help but reveal an inquisitive smile. Putting aside the Real Flying Bird that he had come into contact with several times in this world, the Real Flying Bird in the past, who only knew how to shout crazily, let the people around her manipulate her, and walk down the wrong path step by step, would not have anything to do with an orator. Not to mention, at that critical moment of life and death, he had to comfort the Aubrey soldiers who were overwhelmed by the suffocating pressure. Although I'm surprised, I feel the same way. Night. Talia rubbed her forehead and sighed. I've heard my elders say that the battlefield is like a furnace, constantly melting and refining something in everyone's body, and in the end, giving birth to an unpredictable result. From the looks of it, the Real Flying Bird that Captain Talia spoke of has probably walked on an unimaginable path. Teresa looked away from CIC, who was guiding the search for the speedboat team, and looked at the communication screen. Perhaps, but now is not the time to talk about this. Night, Captain Teresa. Did you find a signal to contact the Prime Minister? Talia's question didn't get the answer she wanted. After all, this was the answer that everyone wanted to get, but they couldn't get it. Now that the monstrous waves that drowned everything had finally subsided, the Aubrey archipelago was still submerged by the endless sea that had yet to recede. However, the seawater that drowned the Aubrey archipelago did not recede according to the calculations made by the son of Dan New's supercomputing terminal. In order to find out if there were any signs of life in the permanent fortifications tens of meters or even hundreds of meters underground, and to contact Carly, Mina, and the others, the Aubrey archipelago sonar was anxious. At the same time, in order to comfort the anxious Aubrey soldiers, the son of Dan New and the Minerva had formed a speedboat search team with the Aubrey soldiers as the main body. Therefore, the previous scene of the speedboats braving the wind and waves, circling the coordinates of the Aubrey archipelago and searching constantly. According to the sonar search results, We haven't found the signal of Prime Minister Carly and the others yet. Even if the terrifying tsunami has subsided, there's still a lot of noise under the water that prevents the sonar from working properly. If we increase the number of sonars, will we have a higher chance of finding the signal of Carly and the others? Ray Minkai rubbed his chin and said thoughtfully, "The permanent underground fortifications built with the strength of a country naturally won't be destroyed so easily. But don't forget that the Aubrey Archipelago is now in an environment that is at least hundreds of meters below the surface. Knight, are you worried about the oxygen in the fortifications?" Teresa immediately grasped the key point that Ray Minkai was worried about. With her experience as the captain of a landing submarine, Teresa knew very well what the humans in the submarine needed in the deep sea. Based on the current situation of the permanent underground fortification under Aube, Teresa suddenly felt that she couldn't let this drag on any longer. Yes. Let's not talk about whether the fortifications have the design for air filtration in an enclosed environment. Just based on the terrifying, destructive power of the earth-shattering tsunami, it's hard not to worry about whether the permanent underground fortifications can withstand it. It seems that we need to make some decisions. Talia did not wait for Ray Minkai to finish speaking and decisively made a decision. The Minerva will land on the surface of the sea in a moment and turn on all the sonars to conduct a new round of search. Captain Talia, no, Captain Teresa. The Minerva is still unable to fly freely in the sky like your son of Dan's slave. Be careful. The son of Dan's slave will monitor the surrounding environmental data at all times and inform you immediately. Okay, please. After a while, the Minerva slowly landed on the surface of the sea below and temporarily set up a powerful sonar surveillance net with the speedboats scattered around the surrounding sea. It had to be said that this method seemed to work. The moment the surveillance net was formed, waves of signals from the depths of the sea below gradually jumped on the screen. It's not noise. It's a signal. It's Morse's signal. It's a signal from the permanent underground fortifications. The CIC of the Minerva, Mei Ling, widened her eyes in surprise and exclaimed, "The fortifications are partially damaged, but there are not many casualties. Please provide assistance as soon as possible." "They're still alive." The red warning light slowly flashed. It dyed the exhausted and fearful faces with a layer of horrifying color that alternated between black and red. Light and cautious footsteps sounded from the depths of the corridor. They walked past the people who were powerlessly sitting on the sides of the corridor or lying unconscious on the ground. Looking at the exhausted and despairing faces, Maureen frowned, but there was nothing she could do. The losses were heavy. The military strength of Paradise Island instantly fell from its peak, where they dared to claim that they would protect any human compatriots who came to seek refuge, to an embarrassing situation where they could not even protect themselves. And this change only took a few minutes. No, it should be said that it took an instant. It was a tsunami that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Even though they received the warning in advance, the fleets patrolling the waters around Paradise Island were destined to be destroyed by the tsunami. Furthermore, even a mobile MS squadron that was closer to Paradise Island could not make it back in time and were swept into the deep sea by the tsunami. No one knew if they were dead or alive. What made Maureen even more worried was that during the emergency evacuation process, there were a few ports on Paradise Island that did not have enough time to close the gates and were swept into the ports by the tsunami. This caused an immeasurable loss to the battleships, MS squadron, and even the people and resources in the ports. Not to mention the various defensive structures that were built on the surface of Paradise Island. Now, even if the monsters did not come after Paradise Island itself would be in trouble. The more Maureen thought about it, the more her heart sank. The destruction of Paradise Island might happen in an instant. If that was the case, what would happen to humanity? "Get out of here! Get out! Get out!" After passing through the corridor, Maureen arrived at the deepest part of Paradise Island. Before she could tell the guards why she was there, an angry roar from the room at the end of the corridor interrupted her. She looked up and saw a group of people with serious expressions and a hint of panic in their eyes leaving the room. Jeep, you have to think carefully. The current situation of Paradise Island is already. Someone in the crowd wanted to yell at the people in the room, but when he saw Margaret's figure, he suddenly shut his mouth. Let's go. Perhaps it was because of Maureen's presence. Perhaps it was because they felt that it was not a good place to shout. That person waved his hand and led the crowd away in a hurry, leaving behind a frowning Maureen. A bunch of idiots. Now is the best chance. After another angry roar came from the room, it fell into silence. The guards did not intend to let them go and only silently signaled to Maureen. Maureen naturally knew what the guards were hinting at. Furthermore, she did not want to get into trouble at this time. Please pass on a message. Just now, the Archangel received a message from the 8th Fleet. Chapter 879. As the waves surged, monsters emerged from the waves and swarmed toward Paradise Island, which was regarded by the Atlantic Federation as the land of salvation for mankind. The cannons that used to roar were silent and no longer roaring. The steel warships that used to block the monsters were gone, and they no longer fired cannonballs that could overturn a large group of assault-level or even fortress-level cannonballs. The steel giants that used to shuttle among the monsters and rain blood were no longer moving, allowing the monsters to break through the sea and step onto the beach of Paradise Island. Alert! Alert! The enemy has broken through the final defense line and is attacking the gate. The big screen in front of him recorded the monsters landing clearly, so clear that Jeepler could see every part of the monsters. This made Jeepler feel disgusted and incomparable anger. Attack. Send all the personnel, tanks, and even the MS that can move out. Quick! If the final defense line is broken, none of us will be able to escape. Quick! Move quickly. Jeepler's eyes were red as he gave orders. Even so, the forces that Paradise Island could mobilize were less than 50% of their peak. Less than 10% of the fleet was left, and the remaining battleships could only form the First Fleet, which was also the only fleet that could be sent out to battle. The ground defenses were all destroyed in the tsunami. Other than the 3 that destroyed Gouda, less than 40% of the MS troops were left. It was just a monstrous tsunami. It was a tsunami that no one had expected. The damage caused by the monstrous tsunami almost overwhelmed Paradise Island and Jeepler, shattering the pride in Jeepler's heart and the fighting spirit that vowed to compete with Dillandar. Reality was so cruel. Sir, the Archangel is calling. Answer it. Yes, reality was incomparably cruel. But in the midst of the cruelty, there was still a glimmer of hope. Captain Mariu, is there any news from Admiral Halbarton? As soon as Mariu's head appeared on the screen, Jeepler immediately went straight to the point. Yes, the Admiral already knows the situation here and said that he will send reinforcements at the appropriate time. Reinforcements? Is that so? As expected of the wise general of our Earth Alliance, Halbarton. After receiving Margot's assurance, the anxiety in Jeepler's heart calmed down a little. As for how Halbarton was going to support Paradise Island, Jeepler didn't ask any further. The calamity on Paradise Island would definitely be discovered by Halbarton, who was far away on the moon. Jeepler believed that Halbarton, who dared to send his trusted aide, the Archangel, to Paradise Island alone, definitely had his own secret information channels. Also, Captain Maru Ramius. Is Stella Lucier still on the Archangel? Now, I'm afraid we need her to stand up and fight for Paradise Island. After calming himself down, Kiplier stared at Stella, who had been taken away by Margot. If possible, Kiplier didn't want to offend Margot and the Archangel. However, the current situation was more important than the current situation. Paradise Island, which had suffered a huge loss, urgently needed the Destruction Gouda to be deployed. And as one of the pilots of the Destruction Gouda, Stella would definitely not let this go. Stella has already left the Archangel as soon as possible. I believe she has already started to board the Destruction Gouda. On the other side of the screen, Margot took the initiative to cut off the communication with Jipper. Captain, the Archangel is ready to attack. Please give your orders. Bucky Lulu on the side reminded at the right time. Okay. Margaro nodded, then stood up and said sternly, I believe everyone already knows and understands our current situation. How pitiful was Paradise Island now? How powerless is it? All of this is not what we want, nor is it what the soldiers who are determined to protect this island want. But the calamity has already happened, and Paradise Island's combat power has been greatly reduced. We have no choice but to use this meager and almost pitiful force to face the attack of those monsters. Pausing, Margaro bit her lips slightly. This attack might be the end of many people's lives. But other than that, we have no other choice, because we're the last line of defense for Paradise Island. After saying that, Margaro looked around. None of the faces she saw were nervous, fearful, or flustered. Some were calm, and determined faces. Nodding slightly, Margaro raised her right hand and gave the order. Archangel, attack! Yes, Archangel, attack! Archangel, fully armed. Those monsters will not let the Archangel attack smoothly. The moment the gate opens, all the weapons except the positron siege cannon immediately fire forward. Bucky Lulu made a shocking instruction, but no one, including Margaro, objected, because they knew that this was the right thing to do. Right now, the beach outside was already filled with many alien monsters. Boom! The moment the heavy gate opened, the twisted and terrifying figures appeared in front of the Archangel. The moment their shadows entered the gate and below the Archangel, Bucky Lulu decisively gave the order. Archangel, attack! Boom! Boom! At this moment, in front of the Archangel, a sea of fire had already risen outside the gate, blasting the monsters that tried to rush into the base through the open gate into pieces. Amidst the billowing smoke, the pure white Archangel slowly accelerated, passed through the gate, passed through the sea of fire that burned the alien monsters, and rushed into the battlefield with Paradise Island as the center. Left rudder 4, target, support the first fleet. Yes, left rudder 4, target, support the first fleet. Then, Margaro looked at Bucky Lulu. Natale, I'll leave the battle orders to you. Understood. Captain, please concentrate on commanding the battle. Leave the rest to me. As soon as the pure white battleship attacked, it relied on its incomparably powerful firepower to wipe out most of the alien monsters that landed, clearing a zone with enough room for maneuver for the subsequent attacks of the MS troops. However, Margaro knew that this was only temporary. Although the alien monsters that were wreaking havoc on Paradise Island were as numerous as ants, the real killer move had yet to appear. Light level. The only thing that could threaten the Archangel was the alien monster that could shoot lasers. This was the reminder that Bucky Lulu had given before. Suddenly, an anxious aura spread in the air. It was as if something terrifying had descended on this battlefield. Boom! It was an incomparably dazzling light. It was the divine flame that burned the sinful bodies of this world to ashes. Wherever the light reached, all the alien monsters were turned into ashes. Even the surface of the sea that was rolling endlessly and surging with countless alien monsters was burned to ashes, leaving several pitch black and straight marks. Amidst the rolling flames, the figures of 3 huge steel giants appeared. It was Destruction Gouda, who was regarded as the trump card by Jepler. Archangel, can you hear me? I'll cover you. While shedding light at the alien monsters, Destruction Gouda, who was in the lead of the attack, sent a communication signal to the Archangel. This voice, Stella, the figure that appeared on the screen, surprised Margaro a little. Yes, Margaro, Archangel, just move forward. Leave this to us. The huge pitch-black body raised its hand and wiped out all the alien monsters that blocked the Archangel's advance. Okay, Stella, protect yourself. Understood. After the Archangel and Destruction Gouda entered the battlefield one after another, Paradise Island's precarious final line of defense finally stabilized. Looking at the battle line that was gradually being pushed back, everyone in the command center couldn't help but sweat. Not enough. Not enough. Now, were just stabilizing the battle line. Jepler, who had his hands behind his back, gritted his teeth. He wasn't confused by the situation in front of him. The enemy. The group of monsters hadn't used their killing moves yet. Now, they were just using their advantage in numbers to consume the strength of Paradise Island. That old fox. Jepler understood that Halberton's reinforcements would come. However, it would only appear when Paradise Island was in danger. This was something that could not be blamed. If it were him, he would definitely do the same. Deep in the ocean, a huge black shadow was standing in this quiet but lively deep sea. It was quiet because the creatures that lived in this deep sea had long fled. The liveliness was due to the fact that countless alien monsters were rushing out of the huge shadow, charging towards the distant island against the chaotic currents and rolling sand. What a surprise! These insects were actually able to survive that tsunami. In the depths of the black shadow, in a certain spacious underground cabin, a graceful yet extremely dangerous figure was laughing. Don't tell me that you were defeated by these bugs. Elizabeth St. Emile's. They weren't the ones who defeated me. It was a knight. Doris Moros. Following the sound of flesh membranes surging, another figure came to the side of the dangerous and graceful figure amidst the liquid biomass flowing all over the ground. She was Elizabeth St. Amos, who had been defeated by Ray Minkai. Knight? Elizabeth St. Emiles. Now, we have already become monsters. Do you still adhere to that damn code? Without waiting for Elizabeth to speak, the graceful and dangerous figure laughed coquettishly. Speaking of which, I'm really interested in meeting the knight who can defeat you, right? You didn't lose to that knight on purpose, did you? Elizabeth, whether you lost to that knight on purpose or not, you'll know when he comes. Come? That knight will come here. He clearly encountered a monstrous tsunami on his side. Now, even his country must have disappeared, right? He'll come, Elizabeth said in her heart. We still have a score to settle between us. Chapter 880. How long has it been since the beginning of the battle? No one seemed to have an answer to this question. In the face of the alien monsters that were constantly surging up the shore like waves and pouncing towards the crumbling defensive line, no one, no soldier, and no human would have thought of this problem. In the face of the alien monsters' attack, the only thing the humans could do was to pick up the weapons in their hands and fire at the ugly and disgusting monsters. Bright red blood flowers, bright tracer bullets, roaring artillery fire. MS shuttled among the alien monsters. The humans who stood guard in the trenches, built into the only scene on Paradise Island at this moment. Don't retreat. Don't retreat. Behind us are our families. We must not let these monsters harm our families. The hoarse voice of the frontline commander constantly echoed in the communication channel. In the trenches, he guided all the human soldiers to resist the alien monsters' attack. Boom, boom, boom. Behind the trenches, the armored forces that were supposed to rely on their powerful mobility to intersperse the battle constantly roared. Even if they couldn't rely on their powerful mobility to intersperse the battle among the alien monsters, they still had enough artillery to destroy these alien monsters. Amidst the bursts of artillery fire, missiles rose into the air from the rear position, cooperating with the armored troops to attack the alien monsters that were further away and had not even landed yet. They were still in the sea. As the artillery shells and missiles fell into the water, they exploded into water columns mixed with broken limbs and blood. The sea around Paradise Island was also quickly occupied by a dazzling red color. The number of enemies in Area A3 has increased. The pressure is skyrocketing. Support is urgently needed. In the Archangel, there are constantly calls for help from all over the front line. Listening to these calls for help, Margot was in a dilemma. No matter where the support was, there would definitely be a front line that the Archangel could not take care of, which would lead to the front line being breached. What should I do? Margot looked up and looked at the main screen. On it, the situation of the entire front line on Paradise Island was displayed. The enemy, they were pouring in from all directions, besieging the ultimate fortress built by the Atlantic Federation in an impenetrable manner. However, this ultimate fortress had lost most of its power. Does destroy Gao to have no choice but to retreat? On the main screen, there was only one signal that belonged to Destruction Gouda. It was moving from the southeast to the west, circling around the defensive line of Paradise Island. That was where the battle was the most intense. By relying on the powerful firepower used to destroy Gouda, they would be able to reduce a lot of pressure. But in the same situation as the Archangel, the Destruction Gouda could not take care of more fronts. Has Destruction Gouda, who went back to rest, finished resupplying? Margaret thought about it and finally asked the command center about it. No. Due to certain circumstances, Destruction Gouda was temporarily unable to attack. Now, the technical department is working hard to eliminate these problems. The reply she received from the command center made her heart sink to the bottom. Certain situations? Although the command center didn't specify what the situation was, Margaret already knew what it was. Then, just like a tool that was discarded after being used by those lunatics, the pilot that they called a biological CPU had a problem. Could it be Stella? At this time, a communication from the command center made Margaret let out a sigh of relief. Archangel, Destruction Gouda number 1 is now ready. Coming to support immediately. Please instruct it to enter the combat area. Understood. Malu nodded. Destruction Gouda number 1 was the body that Stella was piloting. Destruction Gouda number 1. If you can hear me, please immediately go to area A3 to provide support. Is that okay? After a moment of silence, the response from Destruction Gouda number 1 came. Yes. Understood. Looking at Stella, who appeared on the screen, Margaret could clearly see the fatigue on Stella's face. Stella, can you hold on? Yes. No problem. Stella can hold on. Stella smiled weakly, but her hands were still tightly gripping the joystick. Paradise Island, Archangel, and Margaret, I will protect them. As if responding to Stella's inner voice, the Scar Destruction Gouda number 1 attacked and wiped out all the alien monsters that were wreaking havoc in Area A3. In the sea of fire, the beams of light from the huge black giant were enough to stop the footsteps of any alien monster, enough to crush those ugly alien monsters into pieces. Even those behemoths that were far larger than the Destruction Gouda and could smash the MS with one blow could not last one round in front of the Destruction Gouda. The Destruction Gouda that was constantly shooting out blazing beams of light had completely become a mobile turret. Every second, it could wipe out dozens or even hundreds of alien monsters of all sizes. Looking at the screen that was constantly returning to green area A3, Margaret slowly let out a sigh of relief. The front line still held on. Captain, abnormal energy reaction detected on the radar. It is suspected to be the alien monster that can shoot lasers. Position. Hearing Bujilialu's report, Margaret immediately raised her vigilance. Currently, it is still at the edge of Paradise Island security perimeter. Edge of the security perimeter? Isn't that still in the sea? Although the alien monster's lasers were powerful, the alien monsters that were in the sea could not shoot lasers that could threaten the Archangel or even kill the human soldiers. At this moment, a sudden communication sounded. Captain, multiple targets have appeared in the sky above Paradise Island, and they are falling at an extremely fast speed. After calculation, Paradise Island and the surrounding sea area are within the range of their fall. What? At this moment, the sun was already setting. In the sky above Paradise Island, the stars were shining brightly, as if they were falling from the 9 heavens. Wong! Boom! However, when the stars were shining brightly, the alien monsters that were hiding at the edge of Paradise Island security perimeter brazenly launched an attack that no one expected. A huge beam of light tore through the heavy seawater, ignoring the countless substances that were distorting the light as if they were nothing. The huge beam of light shot towards the sky, towards the 9 heavens where countless stars were falling. That is. At this moment, everyone's attention was focused on the huge beam of light that exploded from the bottom of the sea in the distance. Kwang dang! Damn alien monsters! They were actually waiting for this moment. The fragrant red wine flowed slowly along the broken wine glass and onto the ground, reflecting Jepler's face that was distorted due to anger. No one knew better than him what the falling stars in the sky meant. Those were reinforcements. Those were the reinforcements that Halbarton had promised. As long as they received Halbarton's reinforcements, the situation of Paradise Island would be improved, and the savior of humanity that he, Jepler, had created would not be destroyed. But those ugly and damned monsters were actually waiting for this moment to come, to completely push Paradise Island into the abyss of eternal damnation. This were they really, as Jepler had insisted, just a bunch of brainless, instinctive insects. Wherever the beam of light passed, there would be countless explosions of thick fog. It was the afterglow of the falling stars after they were hit and exploded. In an instant, in the sky above Paradise Island, the stars were still falling, and under the afterglow of the setting sun, darkness gradually descended. The darkness of eternal damnation. Wait, there are still things falling towards Paradise Island. Captain, the target is still Paradise Island. Bucky Lulu, who had immediately contacted the command center of Paradise Island, was keenly aware of the anomaly behind the stars that were destroyed by the beam of light. Could it be the Admiral? Margaret's heart trembled as she recalled what Halbarton had said before. Those monsters seem to be in a mess and are only moving based on their instincts, but there must be a mastermind behind these monsters that we don't know about. Therefore, we can't treat them as wild beasts, otherwise we will be doomed eternally. In an instant, Margaret, who had thought through everything, decisively gave the order. Archangel, Starboard 2, target, Area C3. Natale, please. Use all means to interfere with those monsters hidden under the sea. Understood. The tacit understanding between the two allowed Bucky Lulu to decisively and quickly start a new round of command. Goldfield, spread out. Barriante, spread out. Anti-sea missile load. Anti-submarine torpedo load. After a pause, Bucky Lulu's eyes locked onto Area C3 at the edge of Paradise Island security perimeter. Target area, Area C3, fire at will. Fire. With the order, Archangel suddenly transformed into the most ferocious weapon on the battlefield, and all of its weapons except for the positron siege cannon poured down on Area C3. The thick beam of light broke through the tumbling sea and exploded into water pillars. The shells fired by the railgun passed through the water pillars and reached the bottom of the sea, brazenly tearing apart the alien monsters hiding at the bottom of the sea. The missiles and torpedoes that followed right behind them stirred up the entire area. During this period, even if these missiles and torpedoes did not hit the target, the pressure generated by the explosion was enough to make the alien monsters that were lucky enough to escape fall into hell. Thanks to Archangel's action, the light pillars from Area C3 became scattered and could no longer be an obstacle to the stars falling. Moreover, the thick smoke produced by the stars that were blown up before did not dissipate for a long time. Instead, it continued to sink and spread with the wind until it covered most of the battlefield on Paradise Island. At this moment, Margaret had already understood Halbarton's intention. The stars that were blown up were just bait. Behind the smoke bombs released by these baits, the real stars had already descended. Chapter 881. The meteors in the sky were extremely spectacular. Even though the area where the meteors fell was far away from where Ray Minkai and the others were, when the star-like brilliance streaked across the sky, it had already attracted everyone's attention. That is, Lakis frowned and looked at the sky where the meteor shower streaked across. It's an airborne force. It's just that I don't know which unit it belongs to. Ray Minkai put down his right hand that was pressing the headset and told the truth. The moment the meteor shower appeared, the son of Dan Nu had learned from the Throne of Command, who was constantly monitoring the movements of Earth's various orbits, that someone was carrying out a large-scale orbital airborne operation. Is it Zaft? Lakis pondered for a moment and spoke out her guess, but the next moment, she refuted her guess. No. According to the current situation we know, Zaf shouldn't have the strength to carry out an orbital airborne operation. Yeah, we still don't know how many betas are hiding in the universe. Under such circumstances, Zaf's priority should be to protect Plant. Even if the old Fox Tillander has ulterior motives for Earth, I'm afraid he wouldn't dare to be too careless at this critical moment. Ray Minkai nodded and confirmed Lakis's speculation. At the same time, the answer pointed to the only answer. United. Lakis looked at the meteor shower that was gradually becoming denser, thinking and speculating. According to the current intelligence, the United Nations has already lost America, Africa, and other territories and was forced to move to an isolated island in the ocean to continue to resist the invasion of betas. Then, the only force that has the ability to carry out such a large-scale orbital airborne operation is probably the Moon, whose situation is still unknown. But the United Nations has not carried out a decent orbital airborne operation so far. So far, the only one who has been able to carry out an orbital airborne operation and has had relevant successful experience is Zaft. Ray Minkai expressed his thoughts, but he didn't expect Lakis to blink mysteriously. Really? Maybe you're right. But didn't you forget someone? One person. Yes, one person. Lakis showed a mysterious smile, put her hands behind her back, bent down slightly, and looked into Ray Minkai's eyes. Do you need any hints? Ray Minkai smiled and pretended to think for a while. I think I know who it is. Oh? Tell me about it. A woman we all know. Oh? And then? A woman hiding behind the scenes. Thinking about it, when we first appeared in this world, she didn't appear immediately, which meant that she was planning something behind the scenes. Just like her name, Jemingard, a woman who would be devoured if she wasn't careful. Hearing Ray Minkai's evaluation, Lux wrinkled her nose. If Jemingard hears you say that about her, she might be sad for a while. Really? I don't think so. Ray Minkai shook his head and returned to the topic at hand. Lux, you said that Jemingard will guide the combined lunar fleet to master orbital airborne technology? Very likely. Lux nodded slightly. You have to know that from our encounters with the Minerva, the Pillar of Heaven, and Aub during this period of time, we can tell that the time in this world has been much faster than what we know from the very beginning. Or perhaps, after the X1 Rift crisis erupted, Jemingard has already begun to prepare behind the scenes to deal with all kinds of situations that might arise. Does that include the possibility of us returning? Ray Minkai recalled his experience with a woman named Jemingard and felt that Lux's guess was correct. We can't rule out that possibility. Besides, our time is probably synchronized with this world now. Lux raised her right hand and pointed at the meteor shower that occupied half of the sky. Looks like it's time for us to speed up. The seawater that drowned the Aub Islands gradually receded, leaving behind a messy island. As far as the eye could see, other than the dilapidated buildings and a small number of vehicles that hadn't been washed away, the entire Aub Islands had lost most of its vitality. The once lush green forest was washed away by the tsunami, leaving behind the land soaked in salty seawater. Now the Aub Islands could be said to be abandoned. Carrie, Mina, and the others who walked out of the permanent underground fortification were deeply affected after witnessing the tragic state of the Aub Islands. Even if the land was ravaged by the beta, it did not make these strong-willed warriors depressed. Now, facing the irresistible power of nature, no matter how much courage and fighting spirit they had, it was probably gone. Do you regret it? Standing in front of the monument of the last war, Carrie was asked by Mina. Regret, is it useful? Mina, regret wouldn't do anything. This is not something we can stop, Carrie said with a hoarse voice. Then, she squatted down and looked at the words on the monument. When the beta invaded, regret was already useless. From then on, I knew that all I could do was seize the present, seize the opportunity in front of me, and lead the soldiers and people who believe in me, in Ashar, and in Aub into the future. The future? Now, is there a future? I'm afraid this country will not be able to grow food in a short period of time. Moreover, all the equipment in the factories, including the Dawn Society, was destroyed by the tsunami. There is still some equipment in the permanent underground fortification. With a little rest, production can still be resumed. But Carey knew that if they only relied on the equipment preserved in the underground fortification, it was impossible to complete the task of rebuilding Ob. If you want to ask me what I can do, then I can only say that I don't have any ideas. After all, the Pillar of Heaven has perished together with those damned monsters. Is that so? Carey sighed, but did not continue. But maybe I can give you a suggestion. What suggestion? Go and talk tonight. For some reason, Carey suddenly felt that Mina had dug a hole for her. Night? If she said that she wanted to look for Lux, Carey might not have any doubts. But if she wanted to look for Ray Minkai, Carey hesitated. This was normal in Mina's eyes. Moreover, this might be what Mina wanted to see. Prime Minister, the current knight is not the knight you know. Behind him is the empire that Ob cannot hope to reach. Empire? Carey was stunned and even more puzzled. How is that possible? Anything is possible. My Prime Minister. The search operation was soon over. All the permanent underground fortifications were activated, and the evacuees returned to the surface to accept the subsequent arrangements. They calmly waited in the temporary buildings for a new round of arrangements. But anyone with a discerning eye could see that the land called Ob would not be able to grow food in a short period of time. Even a piece of wood that could be used as fuel could not be found. Although they did not want to admit it, the land had become a barren land. Carey, you want to talk to me? In the bridge of the son of Dan's slave, Ray Minkai, who had returned, received such a request. This is the request that Ob submitted just now. Kai, I'm afraid this is a problem with the evacuation of the evacuees. Teresa gently pinched her braids, glanced at Ray Minkai, and then looked at Lakis. Lakis, does the Empire have a similar plan? Plan? Maybe there is. Lakis pondered for a moment, then turned to Ray Minkai. Kai, do you still remember the Pillar of Heaven? Pillar of Heaven? That was just an accident. Moreover, there is a huge difference in the number of evacuees. Not to mention the son of Dan's slave. Even the Minerva is already crowded with evacuees. When the tsunami struck, the two warships had tried their best to shelter the evacuees from Ob. If the evacuees from the permanent underground fortifications were added, the two warships would not be able to complete the evacuation mission. Moreover, the son of Dan's slave and the Minerva still needed to head to Paradise Island. How much resources do we have left? Can we support the next battle? No, at least 5 times the amount of ammunition and resources. The situation on Paradise Island is not optimistic. Hearing Ray Minkai's question, Teresa shook her head helplessly. The previous battle has already consumed 2/3 of the son of Dan's slave's ammunition storage. At the same time, after the battle, we also provided a considerable amount of resources to Ob. Now we're also stretched thin. This was an expected result. After pondering for a moment, Ray Minkai made a decision. Contact the Empire. At this time, we can only rely on the Empire. Coincidentally, just as Ray Minkai finished speaking, the CIC received an unfamiliar signal. Report. Captain, unfamiliar signal received. The other party is requesting to communicate with us. Unfamiliar signal? Connect and put on the main screen. Yes. As the image flashed, the figure that appeared on the screen was actually Veretta Nu. The moment this brown beauty saw Ray Minkai standing beside Teresa, she immediately saluted and solemnly stated her purpose for coming. Britannia Empire's 2nd Air Fleet Commander, Veretta Nu, came under orders to report to Prince Ray Minkai of the Britannia Empire. At ease, after Ray Minkai returned the salute, he looked at the brown beauty who had changed into the Empire's military uniform with astonishment. Veretta, I didn't expect you to be promoted to a general of the Empire. It's just an emergency. Your Highness, this subordinate doesn't have many praiseworthy talents. Veretta laughed bitterly and immediately said with a serious expression, Your Highness, under the orders of Empress Euphemia, the 2nd Air Fleet that completed its first mission will be temporarily under the command of the Prince. Before Your Highness returns to the Empire, the 2nd Air Fleet will obey Your Highness' command and fight for Your Highness. You came at the right time. Right now, I have a mission for you. Veretta, You've been a great help. Raymond Kai's eyes lit up. He suddenly felt that the arrival of the Second Air Fleet, brought by Veretta, solved the urgent situation. Chapter 882. A light breeze blew across the land, stirring up waves of salt white sand. Standing on this piece of land that had lost its greenery, smelling the saltiness in the air, Carrie looked up at the sky above Ob's main island. At this moment, the airship fleet from the other side of the ocean, from the Britannia Empire, was slowly entering Ob's airspace. At this moment, there were no clouds in the sky, and the sun was shining brightly. Under the bright sunlight, the sleek and gorgeous airships had several pairs of light wings extending from both sides, adding a solemn and sacred aura to the airships. The Britannia Empire's second airship fleet? Carrie bit her lips and couldn't help but recall what Mina said to her before. Why don't we rely on Night? Behind him stood an entire empire, a behemoth that Ob can't even look up to. As the Prime Minister of Ob, as well as a participant in the last war, Carrie was very clear about one thing. That was, whether it was the Alliance or Zaft, they were unable to create such a fleet. To be able to make a warship that weighed tens of thousands of tons float in the air and soar freely in the sky was an extremely difficult task in itself. Since the last war, only three airships had been able to do it. One was the Archangel that played an important role in the last war. The second was the Archangel that Hal Barton obtained from the Union for some reason after the last war, and became the flagship of the 8th Airship Fleet. The third was the Minerva that came to support Ob during the crisis not long ago. Apart from these 3 airships, Carrie had never heard of any other large airships that could fly in the atmosphere. Is this the Empire you were talking about? Mina, looking at the Britannia Empire's second floating fleet that began to descend and prepare to land, Carrie said without turning her head. Mina, who had just finished handling the landing matters, came up behind Carrie. Maybe. Actually, I'm the same as you. Mina flung her cloak and walked to Carrie's side with a wry smile. To be honest, I was also shocked. Is that so? Didn't you say that behind Night is the Empire? Indeed. However, I didn't expect the Empire behind the Night to act so quickly. Although I don't know much about the mobility of this fleet from the information from Night, this fleet probably set sail in an emergency after the tsunami. Hearing this, Carrie fell silent. If Mina's guess wasn't wrong, then the fleet would have appeared above Ob even if the terrifying tsunami hadn't happened. Moreover, this was only the second fleet, a new fleet that had just completed its initial preparations and was directly pulled to the battlefield in an emergency. Just how many airships were lying in the docks of the Britannia Empire, waiting to form new fleets? Perhaps this is an opportunity for us, Aubrey, to survive this calamity. Mina, I agree. Mina nodded and looked up at the 5 large airships that had left the second airship formation and were heading towards the designated landing zone. These airships were different from the extravagant ones. Judging from its wide and smooth hull, it should be a logistical airship. When these airships landed and opened their cabin doors, the cargo trucks loaded with supplies drove out one after another. There was no need for words to explain everything. Cheer up, Carly, he said. At least we don't have to starve anymore. However, we still need to make a decision. Decision. Carrie was stunned and suddenly realized something. Yes. Now, we can't defend this land for the time being. Carrie, it's time to make a decision. The green radiance flickered as if it was breathing. This was one of the characteristics of the energy core when it provided energy for the airship light wings. As the light grew brighter and brighter, the second airship fleet slowly hovered above the main island of Ob, stopping in front of the son of the Dan slave who was welcoming the arrival of the second airship fleet. The flagship of the second airship fleet, the Glaston, took the initiative to leave the formation and move to the left of the son of the Dan slave. It floated slightly behind the son of the Dan slave. By the orders of the Supreme Empress of the Holy Britannia Empire, Veretta Nu is leading the second airship fleet of the Britannia Empire to provide support. Your Highness, please give us your instructions. All right, let's play this unnecessary etiquette once. Veretta, you should know that I don't like this. Lei Mingkai let out a bitter smile. He waved his hand to signal Valletta to stop and asked, "What are you talking about? Beretta, what's the situation on the Empire's side? The tsunami should have affected the Empire's mainland, right?" Ray Minkai would never believe that the 10,000-meter-tall tsunami wouldn't have affected the Empire's mainland. Judging from the scale of the disaster, it would definitely cause a great disaster and loss to the Pacific coast. This wasn't a local-scale disaster to begin with. Instead, it was a secondary disaster that spread across the entire world. The tsunami did affect the Empire's mainland. However, under the leadership of Her Majesty Euphemia, the Empire immediately mobilized Damocles and the First Air Fleet to set up defenses and provide reinforcements at key points along the coastline. Set up defenses? Ray Minkai caught the crux of Veretta's words. Yes, set up defenses. However, the Empire wasn't invaded by any enemy. The enemy of Damocles and the First Airship Fleet was the tsunami, and the weapon they used was Freya. Veretta's summary was short, but the amount of information was shocking. Ray Minkai and the others had personally experienced the might of the 10,000-meter-tall tsunami. Moreover, the price for this experience was the terrifying scene of the Ob archipelago being drowned by the tsunami. Freya, it can do that? Teresa was a little surprised. As one of the few people in the Empire who had the authority to use Freya, she didn't think of using this super weapon to resist the tsunami. Yes, Madame Teresa, if we use more than a few Freya to attack, it can indeed reduce the damage and losses caused by the tsunami. However, the Empire's current Freya can't take care of the Empire's long west coast. It can only defend the important points on the west coast. Ray Minkai sighed and nodded. But it's enough. Compared to Ob, the Empire's mainland is much better. Yes, when the second airship fleet set off, Her Majesty mentioned that the prince should act according to the situation and not be too concerned about the Empire's feelings. Yes, Veretta's words made Ray Minkai frown slightly. This reminded him of the conversation he had with Lux not long ago. "Your Majesty, have you made your decision?" At this moment, Lux's voice sounded softly. She had already arrived beside Ray Minkai and raised her head to look at Veretta on the screen. Veretta saluted the moment she saw Lux. "Yes, Her Majesty has instructed that if I see Madame Lux Klein, I must give her a clear and concise reply. Her Majesty has already approved and begun to prepare Madame Lux's suggestion." Meeting Ray Minkai's astonished gaze, Lux nodded confidently and said, "Yes. Yes, I'm clear." Then, Lux looked at Ray Minkai and met his gaze. Ray Minkai could clearly see the sincerity in Lux's eyes. "Then, Kai, it's time to set off, isn't it?" Carts after carts of supplies drove out of the airship. After unloading the supplies, the transport carts carrying the wounded boarded the airship that had finished unloading the supplies. Then, the airship that carried the Ob personnel and the wounded slowly took off, following the planned route, and entering the formation of the B Squadron returning to the Empire's mainland, waiting for the time to set off. "This is the last batch. Carrie." Mina stood beside the jeep and looked at Carrie, who had finished signing the last document. "Do you want to come up?" "Carrie." After passing the document to the person beside her, Carrie looked up at the magnificent and sacred second airship fleet in the sky, then looked at Mina and shook her head slightly. "No, it's enough for you to go to the Empire's side. No matter what, this is still our Aubrey, our home. Even if it has been washed into a barren land by the tsunami, home is still home. We still need someone to guard this place." "Is that so? Since you've made your choice, I won't say anything else. There will be about 10,000 people left to guard the main island. In addition, there are still some MS components left behind in the underground fortifications. We should be able to assemble an MS team. You have to prioritize this." After saying that, Mina looked at the distant horizon that had calmed down. After all, no one knows if those monsters will come here again. "That's true. I'll keep an eye on this side. I'll leave the Empire's side to you. Let's do our jobs. Carrie, see you in the Empire." "See you." The choice had been made. Mina took most of the Ob personnel, including the wounded, and temporarily retreated to the Britannia Empire. Carrie, on the other hand, continued to carry out her duties as the Prime Minister of OB. She led the 10,000 people who decided to stay on Ob's main island to guard this homeland and wait for the situation to clear up. As the light wings shone brighter and brighter, the Empire's second airship fleet's flagship, Glaston, also bid farewell to the son of Dan Nu and led the second airship fleet back to the Empire's mainland. Teresa, Captain Talia, it's time. Let's go. After watching the second airship fleet leave, Ray Minkai looked in the direction of Paradise Island and said loudly. Chapter 883. Fatigue flooded her body like a tide, constantly occupying her limbs and impacting every nerve in her body. It's time to rest. This was a signal from the depths of her body, and it was also an alarm. However, now was not the time to rest. Margaret took a deep breath and placed her hand on her forehead. She closed her eyes slightly and tried to make use of this short period of time, which was less than 10 minutes, to adjust herself. Captain, if you're tired, why don't you go back and rest? Hearing this, Malu opened her eyes. What she saw was a face that was not much different from her current appearance. Natale, you should be the one resting. Compared to her captain, Bucky Lulu, who was the busiest and had the heaviest burden during the battle, should be the one resting. No, I can still hold on for a while. Now, the attack of those monsters has temporarily stopped. Bucky Lulu shook her head and turned to look at the smoke-filled battlefield outside the porthole. It was already the 5th day of the defense of Paradise Island. In fact, after Paradise Island was hit by the tsunami, it would not last long. It was thanks to the support of the orbital airborne troops from the 8th Fleet that they were able to hold on until the 5th day. Under the command of Halbarton, the 8th Fleet not only brought a lot of manpower, but also supplies and ammunition that Paradise Island urgently needed, and even MS, battleships, and defensive components. The variety of weapons made people marvel at Halbarton's foresight. Thanks to the addition of this new force, Paradise Island, which was on the verge of collapse, miraculously held on until the 5th day, which was also the moment when the seemingly endless number of monsters that kept rushing out from the sea retreated. Don't be careless. The reason we can hold on until now is because the enemy hasn't thrown those monsters into the battlefield yet. Margaret frowned. Those laser-firing monsters only appeared when they were trying to intercept the airborne troops. After being disrupted by us many times, they've been lurking outside the security perimeter of Paradise Island and have not appeared since. Bucky Lulu also had a headache. She knew that those monsters were extremely dangerous, but because of the lack of military strength, she could not dispatch troops to encircle those monsters. Alert! Underwater Investigation Network Surveillance heard something. Those monsters are coming again. Before the two could continue to talk, the familiar alarm sounded again. Along with it, there were also water pillars that exploded high into the sky. It was the torpedo formation that was rearranged by the torpedo speedboat while the monsters were retreating. These mines either sank directly to the bottom of the sea or maintained a certain height from the bottom of the sea. They were densely distributed along the monster's attack route. Looking at the densely packed water pillars that kept rising and exploding, Paradise Island, which had just gotten a chance to catch a breather, became nervous again. Everyone get ready. Attack! Jipper fiercely slammed the table and ordered through gritted teeth. How many of these damn monsters are there? I just can't kill them all. In these 5 days, Jepler, who also didn't have much time to rest, had almost reached his limit. Facing the almost endless alien monsters, Jepler, who used to have strong self-confidence, was on the verge of collapse. This was completely different from the enemies he had faced so far. These aliens did not care about how many tactics and strategies the humans had used. From the start to the end, they only cared about swarming forward and charging towards the defensive line of Paradise Island with a terrifying aura. The battle began once again. East of Paradise Island, somewhere deep in the sea, the huge black shadow was still constantly swallowing alien monsters, as if there was no stopping for a moment. Oof, what a surprise. The resilience of these bugs is unexpectedly strong. they can still hold on for 5 days in the face of the powerful attack of the beta. Standing on a high place, the woman watched the beta crawl out of the biological sac and laughed softly. If you didn't let those orbital airborne troops land successfully on the first day of the attack, everything would have been over. Doris. Another figure pointed out the woman's mistake methodically. Let them go. Haha, that's not necessarily true. We have scattered the human forces in this world in one fell swoop. We were just worried about how to find these little rats running around and kill them. Doris stretched out her right hand, looked at the sharp claws that popped out from the tip of her index finger, and laughed. It just so happens that with the existence of this island, we can catch them all in one fell swoop. What's more, not long ago, the little rat on that island arrogantly announced that it was the final fortress of humans. With that, Doris's figure flickered and appeared in front of the woman who pointed out her strategic mistake. She used her sharp index finger to gently lift her chin. Look, that little rat is working so hard. Shouldn't we grant him his wish? Elizabeth, my war princess. Pa! A sharp gust of wind swept past, and Doris quickly retreated. Don't mention that name again. The Witch of Torture. A terrifying, murderous intent fell from the sky and heavily pressed on Doris's body. But she didn't care. In fact, when the two first met, it was before their hometown was destroyed. At that time, one of them was the Empire's war princess, and the other was one of the generals of the Oz Federation, the Witch of Torture. The two young people had fought many times on the battlefield, and there were victories and defeats. But what they didn't expect was that after their hometown was destroyed, they also became Commander Beta monsters at the same time. How boring. The past is not used to escape. Elizabeth's sharp gaze stared fiercely at Doris. After a long while, Elizabeth turned and left. Now, the humans who should gather. Let's do it. Doris smiled lightly and looked at Elizabeth's figure as she left. Of course, there's no need to trouble our war princess. Clang! A sharp sound brushed past Doris's ears. A trace of pain quickly spread from the side of her face. Smelling the fishy, sweet smell, Doris actually felt a trace of joy. Doris, next time, you'll definitely die. Her fingers touched her cheeks, and there were already scarlet spots. Doris wiped them on her lips and revealed a dangerous and charming smile. Then, when the time comes, you won't have to do anything. Roar. Not long after, figures that were even larger and more ferocious than before charged out of the enormous insect nest in the deep sea. This was the trump card that Doris had been holding in her hand all this time, but had yet to use. A trump card that could crush Paradise Island. In the dark, deep sea, the beta monsters tirelessly advanced through the rolling sand. The strong ocean currents could not stop their footsteps at all. From the enlistee level to the fortress level, the beta monsters treated them as nothing. Moreover, behind this huge beta army, there were several figures that were larger, more ferocious, and more terrifying than the fortress level. With every step that their huge, sharp legs took, they would have already passed over the bodies of several assault levels. In this strong ocean current, the ferocious and terrifying eyeball that grew at the front of the huge body was actually moving nimbly. It was not affected by the ocean current at all, as it wantonly searched the surroundings. Super heavy light level. As expected, Doris sent him out. In front of the deep sea hive, Elizabeth floated in the water and watched the beta army leave. If that's the case, it's time to end it. Just as Doris had said, now is the best time to end everything. The beta army that came out in full force took less than a few minutes to break through Paradise Island's underwater defense network and directly set foot on Paradise Island's beach defense line in a barbaric manner. Paradise Island was once again on the verge of collapse. Area A1 requesting fire support. The number of those monsters is 2. The screen in front of them had just shown the scene from the front line. The frontline commander's call for help had just sounded in their ears. Amidst the attack of a black shadow, it turned into a burst of meaningless noise and snowflakes. This scene was appearing one after another in the command center. However, the people sitting in the command center were already used to all of this. Jess Squad. Immediately unite the nearest armored forces and head to Area A1 for support. Wild Dog Squadron, head to Area B2 at the fastest speed and snipe the enemy. Amidst the desperate calls for help and screams from the front line, the atmosphere in the command center became more and more oppressive, so oppressive that Jepler could not sit still. Is this a general attack? Those damn monsters! What's the situation with the 8th Fleet? Are there any more reinforcements? No. When the battle broke out, we had already sent a request for help to the 8th Fleet. However, General Halbarton rejected our request. What? Jipper sprang to his feet and seized the valet by the collar. Say that again. Suddenly, the main screen in the command center lit up with a blinding light. The light was so dazzling that it attracted the attention of the entire command center almost instantly. What is going on? The next moment, the main screen flashed, and the scene that appeared on it was an extremely horrifying scene. In the rolling waves, sharp limbs moved alternately, and there were strands of ugly fur and horrifying eyes of various sizes. A gigantic monster that was about 100 meters tall walked out from the bottom of the sea step by step and headed towards Paradise Island. What kind of monster is that? Shock, panic, nervousness, and other emotions occupied the hearts of all the humans the moment the gigantic monster appeared. However, this was just the appetizer. This was because the moment most of its body left the surface of the sea, a dazzling light suddenly burst out and rushed straight toward Paradise Island. With an unstoppable and unavoidable momentum, it headed straight for Paradise Island's defense line. Boom! With just one hit, Paradise Island's defense line collapsed on the spot. Chapter 884. 10,000 meters in the sky, above the sea of clouds. The son of Dan's slave, wrapped in a radiation shield, was flying at high speed. Inside the bridge, there was a tense and busy atmosphere. Drone number 1 detected a high-energy reaction in the direction of Paradise Island. It is suspected to be a light-class laser. Drone number 3 attempted to enter the airspace near Paradise Island, but it was shot down by an unknown object 15 seconds ago. The operator in charge of the drone's investigation continued to report the situation one by one, allowing the people standing next to the holographic projection tactical table to formulate the next battle plan. Teresa's eyes reflected the constantly refreshed intelligence interface as she carefully considered the next battle plan. According to the plan, the son of Dan's slave, which had autonomous flight and energy shield technology, would be responsible for the assault and luring the enemy. The Minerva, under the cover of the son of Dan's slave, would detour from the northwest of Paradise Island to support the garrison on Paradise Island. Although this plan was very troublesome, it was the only choice at the moment. After all, compared to the son of Dan's slave, which had an energy shield, the Minerva, which could only rely on its own laminated armor to resist the beam attack, was a bit risky in the current battlefield. While thinking, Teresa looked at Ray Minkai standing opposite her. Kai, the high-energy reaction detected by the drone just now, is it the type you mentioned? It's very likely. Ray Minkai nodded, put down his right hand that was rubbing his chin, then tapped on the tactical projection screen and pointed at the figure that popped up. Ultra-heavy light class. This is the biggest and scariest beta we know of. Its laser can even destroy targets in synchronous orbit. Moreover, the weaknesses of the light class and heavy light class also disappear on this huge body. Teresa frowned as she examined the ugly and ferocious figure. Is it because its size has reached a certain limit, so it can use more attack methods to defend against close-range enemies? Indeed. So, I'm afraid I can only deal with this ultra-heavy light class. Of course, after familiarizing with its movement pattern, the M9X with the Lambda drive system can also form an attack team to attack this monster. Ray Minkai pressed the button and switched to the ultra-heavy light class projection while making the next arrangements. Crusade in small teams? Looks like it's going to be tricky. To be honest, Teresa was a little surprised. She was very clear about the power of the Lambda drive system. However, there were only 4 pilots who could use this power on the son of Dan's slave. Ray Minkai naturally didn't need to be mentioned. The remaining three were Melissa Mao, Sosuke Xiangliang, and Cruz Wilba. As for the other pilots, they were still unable to adapt to the M9X. They had no choice but to obey Teresa's orders and sit on the bench until now. Looks like I have to get Melissa and the others to get used to the power of the Lambda drive system as soon as possible. Putting aside the existence of Ray Minkai, who is almost like a BUG just based on the power of the 9 dragons that fought against Mithril, as long as he was proficient in using the power of the Lambda drive system, it was undoubtedly equivalent to a one-man army. However, Melissa and the other two were still unable to touch that boundary. Don't worry, Teresa. The power of the Lambda drive system is not something that can be mastered in a day. Ray Minkai seemed to have seen through Teresa's thoughts. No, Kai, let's not talk about the others. Why were you able to use the Lambda drive system so proficiently when you sat on the crossbow for the first time? It was fine if Ray Minkai didn't mention it. As soon as he mentioned it, Teresa became serious. According to the research data obtained when Mithril suppressed the amalgam, activating the power of the Lambda drive system required mental power to reach a certain limit. And according to the selection criteria of the amalgam, the person who could reach that limit was undoubtedly. Teresa moved her lips, but she didn't say that word. However, his eyes were fixed on Lei Minkai, and there was a trace of indignation in his eyes. Yes, there are some historical reasons. Ray Minkai was stunned for a moment. Then he found a random reason to try to fool her. Fortunately, before Teresa could ask more questions, the drone happened to send the latest news. Report: Drone number 7 has successfully entered Paradise Island's airspace, now displaying the image on the main screen. The next moment, there was a wave of shocked exclamations. Is this the power of the super heavy light class? Richard Madukas gasped. When Ray Minkai and Teresa were discussing just now, he was also beside them. However, it was better to see it with his own eyes than just hearing about it. On the island that was regarded as humanity's final fortress, 3 huge trenches had been carved out. From the surveillance footage alone, these 3 huge trenches were at least tens of meters wide. Moreover, at the bottom of the trenches, there was even lava that hadn't cooled down, yet flowing slowly. On both sides of the huge trenches, there were armored vehicles and even the wreckage of the MS that was destroyed. With just one attack, it destroyed an island fortress that was armed to the teeth. Teresa's expression was unusually serious. God, that's the Archangel. When the entire bridge fell into a heavy atmosphere, Lux's voice was heard. The image changed, and a familiar but unusually miserable battleship appeared on the screen. The originally white and smooth hull was now covered in scars, and a part of the port side was cut off by some kind of high-energy weapon, causing the internal structure of the battleship to be faintly visible. It wasn't difficult to see that the weapons on the port side of the battleship were already scrapped. It could only rely on the weapons on the right side to hold on. In particular, the faintly flickering thrusters on the port side of the Archangel were even more noteworthy. Where is the Minerva? Ray Minkai knew at a glance that the Archangel should have been affected by the super heavy light class attack, or even a direct hit. Now, the Minerva has arrived at the designated location and hasn't been attacked by the Beta for the time being. It can enter the battle at any time. After hearing the CIC's reply, Teresa immediately ordered, all ships, level 1 combat mode. After that, Teresa looked at Ray Minkai and Lux. I'll be in charge of contacting the Archangel. Lux smiled slightly and took the initiative to sit down in another CIC's empty seat. Then I'll attack. But Freya has to be left for last. We still don't know what that person is planning. Understood. Desperate situation. Now, it was a desperate situation. Just now, the moment the monsters appeared, Paradise Island's defense line collapsed. Paradise Island's defense line collapsed. Personnel, armored forces, MS forces, fortifications, in the blink of an eye, they were reduced to nothingness under the attack of the 3 monsters. The ear-piercing alarm in their ears meant that the Archangel was almost at the end of its life. Captain, the port side of the hull is out of control, almost uncontrollable. It's only a matter of time before it falls. As the old helmsman of the Archangel, Arnold Newman had exhausted all means and thought of all means, but there was nothing he could do. A part of the port side of the Archangel was cut off by the super heavy light class attack, and the damage was so great that it had affected the internal structure of the Archangel. If this continued, the Archangel would only lose power, fall, or even crash. Margaret gritted her teeth. Her right hand clenched tightly into a fist, and cold sweat appeared on her forehead. Hold on a little longer. Now, the Archangel can't retreat. Yes, Captain, I'll do my best to maintain the Archangel. Arnold Newman, who knew the urgent situation at hand, agreed to Margaret's unreasonable request. Natale, how much of the Archangel can we use? Bucky Lulu shook her head, and her expression was very serious. The weapons on the port side have all been destroyed, and it's lucky that they didn't explode on the spot. What's left is the weapons on the starboard side. In addition, I'm afraid that the positron siege cannon can only fire once. After a pause, Bucky Lulu slowly took a breath, and a determined light appeared in her eyes. Moreover, after the shot, the energy system of the Archangel will probably collapse. At that time, whether it explodes on the spot or loses power and falls into the water, we can only leave it to fate. Hearing this, Margot revealed a relieved smile. Is that so? In that case, it's fine. It's also our last effort. Natale, arrange the manpower. I've already arranged it. I'm very sorry. He acted on his own without your permission, Captain. No, I'm not worried about you. Moreover, I should be the one apologizing. No, Captain, before coming here, I've already made up my mind. Moreover, everyone on the Archangel believes that it's the same. Bucky and Lulu's words were echoed by everyone on the bridge. Thank you, everyone. Then, the Archangel, maximum speed. Target those giant monsters. Natale, once they enter the range of the positron siege cannon, fire immediately. Even if it's only one, we have to kill those monsters. Yes. Below, the monsters had already spread, and above the trenches were the figures of those ugly monsters wreaking havoc. The gunshots that represented human activity and the sound of cannons also disappeared in this endless wave of monsters. The Archangel, with thick smoke trailing behind it, continued to accelerate, using all the power it could muster to fly past the trenches where the monsters were wreaking havoc, heading towards the behemoths that were slowly walking up the beach. Number 1. The final line of defense has collapsed. Return immediately to protect the base. Quick! On the other side of the line, the destruction, Gouda number 1 driven by Stella, also noticed the movement of the Archangel. But before Stella could react, the order from the command center reached her ears. But the Archangel, don't worry about that ship. Your mission is to protect the base. Quick, return to the base immediately and protect us. Suddenly, the voice in the communication turned into a male voice that was both unfamiliar and familiar. Stella quickly recognized the owner of the voice. That was the voice of the mastermind behind these biological CPUs, Jepler, who was hiding behind them and controlling them. Destruction Gouda, number 2, return to the base. Number 3, return to the base. Sure enough, as soon as Jepler's voice sounded, the other 2 Destruction Gouda immediately ignored the safety of the line of defense and immediately returned. Looking at the position that collapsed on the spot because of the sudden departure of the 2 Destruction Gouda, Stella showed a trace of reluctance. Go back, stay behind to guard the position, or chase after the Archangel and support it. Countless thoughts kept popping up in Stella's mind, filling her thoughts. DD, Destruction Gouda number 1, we can still hold on. It was the voice of the frontline commander in charge of this line of defense. Stella remembered that he seemed to be called House. He was a major in the army who had a hearty smile and was highly respected by his subordinates. Major House, are you kidding me? Do you think I don't know the situation of the position? As soon as Destruction Gouda leaves, you're finished. Seeing the situation of the position collapsing after number 2 and number 3 suddenly left, Stella didn't want to agree no matter what. Hey, little girl, You're the one who's joking. How can we be a bunch of weaklings from the 2nd Battalion? Half an hour. We can hold on for half an hour. Behind House's voice, there was a burst of intense gunfire and faint angry curses. Hearing these voices, Stella couldn't bear to close her eyes. She understood. Half an hour. I'll be back in half an hour. Hold on. Okay, we'll hold on until then. After saying that, House put down the microphone and looked up at the sky. He watched as the pitch-black steel giant began to accelerate and chase after Archangel. He knew that the young girl had made the best choice. Go, kill those monsters. Take our share. As he spoke, Major House picked up the button next to the microphone and sighed. I didn't expect that at such an old age, I still have to say such words to deceive a little girl. Then, a series of violent explosions that were enough to drown the entire trench soared into the sky, swallowing all the monsters that invaded this trench. They died along with the soldiers in this trench. Major House. Looking at the trench engulfed in flames, Stella's eyes blurred, and there was a sorrowful anger in her heart. Number one, what the hell are you doing? Come back quickly. Jepler's voice sounded one after another on the communication channel, but he still couldn't make Stella listen to him. Destruction Gauda number 1. Now go to support Archangel and help it eliminate the 3 monsters. Over. The furious Stella used the last of her rationality to send a message back to the command center, then completely cut off the connection with the command center. Damn monsters. Die. Chapter 885. Pale figures, scarlet figures, unpleasant smells, trembling earth. There were also dents on the steel gate due to the continuous impact. Boom, boom. The steel gates that were made by the ton kept shaking and were on the verge of collapse. The soldiers hiding behind the gates were either serious, nervous, or panicked. But even so, not a single soldier turned around to escape from this position that was about to be slaughtered. Get ready. Among these soldiers, a middle-aged man in his 40s waved his arm and commanded his subordinates to quickly get into position. Quick, you guys, those monsters are about to rush in. Ka. Amidst the loud banging sounds, the soldiers were either calm or had their hands trembling as they loaded their guns, waiting for the moment when the gates would be broken open. At that time, it would be a moment of life and death. Boom! Suddenly, the gates were broken open with a loud bang. Open fire. Don't let those monsters step in here. Immediately after, gunshots rang out. Paradise Island Base's final line of defense was broken through. The first main gate has been broken through. 3rd Company lost contact. The 6th secondary gate has been broken through. 9th Company has suffered heavy losses, requesting backup. In the command center, the anger on Jepler's face had already subsided. His expression remained eerily calm. This made his follower who had followed him for a long time feel his heart skip a beat, as if something was about to happen. In the next second, the follower noticed a small movement from Jepler. Then, the follower nodded silently, turned around, and left. From the beginning to the end, no one noticed the small movement between Jepler and his follower. It's over. Jipper took a deep breath and said to himself, That's right. But it's not over yet. Even if humans lose the Earth, they still have the moon. The red area on the big screen in front of him continued to expand, spreading towards the core area of the command center at a speed visible to the naked eye. Those monsters, no one can stop them. The base was done for. Not long after, the follower who had left and returned had already arranged everything. In the already panicked command center, Jepler's figure disappeared without a trace. Da-da-da, in the tunnel, gunshots mixed with painful screams echoed endlessly, constantly stimulating Jepler's thoughts. Lord Jepler, there's a battle over there. We can't go through. We need to take a detour. The attendant at the front gestured for everyone to stop. As long as we can escape from here, you can lead the way however you want. Quick! Jipperer grew more impatient. This was because he had heard a voice that did not belong to a human. Soon, the monsters would be here. Yes, please follow me. Lord Jipper. However, Jepler and the others who had changed their route did not know that their actions were being watched by a pair of eyes hidden in the darkness. Sir, all the civilians have been evacuated to the lowest level of the base. A serious-looking man walked out from the shadows and stood not far behind the woman who was watching the surveillance screen and said respectfully, "Yes, what's the plan?" The woman nodded slightly, still looking at the monitor screen, watching every move of Jepler and the others. "It's been arranged. After the bomb is detonated, Lieutenant Colonel Felix will concentrate most of his forces on the 2 reserve passages to stop the alien monsters." Yes, Lieutenant Colonel Felix is a sensible person. At this time, Jepler and the others in the screen seem to have encountered some problems and changed their route again. Number 3, you seem to be a little shaken. Are you afraid? Looking at Jepler and the others running for their lives, the woman asked her subordinates a question. "No, sir. This subordinate is not shaken, nor is he afraid. I'm just worried about whether the plan will go wrong." The serious-looking man denied that he would be shaken and afraid. "The plan will go wrong?" The woman smiled lightly. "Yes. No matter how perfect the plan is, it will always fail because of some variables. There is no problem with this." After a pause, the woman threw out another question. Number 3, do you still remember the report issued by D.S.S.D. after the X-1 Rift crisis broke out? Report? Is it the report about the existence of another world? Isn't this internationally recognized? Wait. In an instant, the serious-looking man named Number 3 seemed to have thought of something. "Sir, you're saying that Sir might... No, I've already come to this battlefield, but even so, what can he do with just the strength of that Sir alone? The strength of one person? Hee. It seems that you didn't take that report to heart." Although she said that, the woman did not blame her capable subordinate. "Do you still remember the lion spirit of Caucasus?" "The lion spirit of Caucasus? Isn't that Sir's?" This time, Number 3 understood the woman's thoughts. The lion spirit of Caucasus was a mysterious legend that spread in the Caucasus Mountains during the last war. Although there were many versions of this so-called legend, to the snake of the atrium that was hidden in the dark side of the world and watched all the changes in the world, it had long known the truth of this legend. It even knew the true body of the so-called lion spirit. That is not an airframe that can be created with the technology possessed by the Alliance or Zaft. No, I'm afraid that is not an airframe that can be created by humans, because it is very likely to be a metal creature with life. Number 3, don't do it again. The woman knew that Number 3 was guessing based on the information he received. Therefore, she did not blame her subordinate too much. "Yes, Number 3. Behind it, sir, is not Scandinavia, nor is it plant, and definitely not Zaft. It is a huge monster that we are not familiar with and do not know of. Therefore, this operation is not a gamble, but a preparation." "Yes, your subordinate understands. And go and prepare. It is time for our Sir Jepler." As a trusted subordinate, Number 3 already knew everything that he could know. But what he did not know was that before the 8th Fleet carried out the mission to support Paradise Island, something unusual happened to the radar unit that was in charge of detecting the surrounding universe. It was an unknown energy fluctuation that had suddenly erupted at a certain time, but then quickly disappeared without a trace. After receiving the report, Halbarton had also ordered the nearest patrol fleet to investigate, but they did not find anything. Until after the monstrous tsunami that swept across the entire Pacific Ocean, the moon base discovered something in a certain universe. A looming satellite fortress that had never appeared in the Alliance's records was captured by the moon base's optical radar. "Sir, the World Serpent has prepared everything." The woman's voice slowly fell, like the sound of a bell that had reached the end of fate, becoming the full stop of some people's lives. Boom! Accompanied by a violent explosion, Jepler and the others who had changed their evacuation route again and again could only watch as the tunnel in front of them was blown up. Looking at the billowing flames and the collapsing gravel, Jepler's mind was almost blank. "Well, what's going on? What's going on?" Kiplier, who had finally reacted, grabbed the attendant's collar. "Didn't you say that everything has been arranged?" "Sir, Sir, please. The follower was also stunned for a moment. He instinctively pointed to another path, but before he could finish speaking, another explosion followed closely behind. Boom! This time, Kiplier could no longer scold his follower, because his life had come to an end, completely buried in this explosion. Target completed. Follow the plan and carry out the next step of the operation. In the command center, Number 3 looked at the man beside her. He was Lieutenant Colonel Phillies mentioned by Number 3. Lieutenant Colonel Phillies, except for Passage 1 and Passage 3, the other passages have been blown up, and the attacks of those monsters have temporarily stopped. Yes, I understand. I hope that what you said is not a lie. Lieutenant Colonel Phillies nodded and signaled his subordinates to launch a new round of blocking operations according to the plan. After blowing up many intricate passages and gathering the scattered forces, the humans finally succeeded in stopping the Beta's invasion of Paradise Island. However, this was only temporary. Facing the seemingly endless Beta that constantly rushed from the bottom of the sea to the beach and then attacked the underground base of Paradise Island, the pressure the humans faced was also increasing. Oh, those bugs are still a bit decent. They actually blew up most of the passages. That's interesting. But can that stop the Beta's attack? In the dark shadows at the bottom of the sea, Doris smiled contemptuously. Doris, that's it. Our guests have arrived. Oh, as the sound of rolling thunder echoed in the sky, the sea that was constantly gushing out of the Beta also became filled with fog and heat waves. Boom! The pure white battleship exhausted all its energy to fire the positron siege cannon across the sea and suddenly pierced through the huge monster closest to it, the super heavy light class. However, at the moment the positron siege cannon fired, the huge monster also launched its strongest attack. Boom! The brilliance that symbolized death disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving behind the super heavy light class that was penetrated by the positron siege cannon and the pure white battleship wrapped in flames. Archangel, Archangel, please reply if you hear me. In just a moment, the scene of the Archangel that had almost reached its limit being hit again stung Stella's eyes deeply. It's okay. Stella, it's just the starboard side that was hit. After all, we have a reliable helmsman. In the flames, the moment before the Archangel completely lost power, it barely turned around and fell toward the cliff on the other side. Chapter 886. Sand and gravel splattered, and the broken steel battleship slammed into the ground, leaving a deep mark. Although the hull of the ship was badly damaged, it could still be considered to have landed safely. However, the huge commotion caused by the battleship's crash had already attracted the surrounding Betas. A blazing light descended from the sky, obliterating all the Betas surrounding the Archangel. Stella, don't worry about us. Get rid of those two monsters first. We can solve the situation here. In the battered bridge, Margaret endured the dizziness, took out her weapon from the side of her seat, and sent a communication to Destruction Gao. But Stella could naturally see Margaret's actions from the shaky screen. After hesitating for a while, she finally made a decision. I'll be right back. Boom! A laser came from the side, but it was dodged by the alert Stella piloting Destruction Gauda. Moreover, it coincidentally wiped out the large wave of Betas on the right side of the Archangel. Is this considered good luck? The failure of the second super heavy light class allowed Stella to seize the opportunity and counterattack with 3 consecutive Super Sea Demon Beast 1,580mm double-position triple cannon. In the blink of an eye, the remaining brilliance of the first wave of laser in the air had not completely disappeared, and the second wave of brilliance illuminated the area once again. Moreover, the second super heavy light class was killed in one fell swoop. At this moment, the sea breeze was already filled with a strange smell. However, Stella did not notice this, because the fall of the first and second super heavy light class was not the end of the battle. Among the behemoths eyeing Paradise Island covetously, there was still a third super heavy light class. The opportunity was only for a moment. The thrusters on the back of Destruction Gao suddenly exploded, giving this huge and heavy steel a powerful thrust. Hum! A terrifying tremor suddenly broke out in the air. It was a laser. The third super heavy light class had taken the initiative to attack. The laser fired from the ferocious and terrifying giant eyes, crossed the void, and struck Destruction Gao with an earth-shattering momentum. This attack would definitely be able to destroy Gao. Fortunately, Destruction Gaoda's positron reflector was able to block it. An opportunity had appeared once again. In the blink of an eye, all the equipment on Destruction Gaoda's body locked onto this super heavy light class monster. As long as he could kill him, the battle would turn around. Paradise Island. Humanity would welcome the hope of victory. Die. Amidst the girl's screams, Destruction Gauda unleashed all of his weapons. Dozens of light beams streaked across the sky and directly bombarded the body of the third super heavy light class creature. The gigantic yet fragile, sinister, and ugly sinful body was instantly scorched and pierced through. Especially the few terrifying eyeballs that had destroyed Paradise Island's defensive line. They had lost their terrifying radiance. Rumble. Amidst the soaring waves, the last super heavy light class beast collapsed with a loud rumble, sinking into the pitch-black seabed. Fallen. Stella gasped for breath as she stared at the huge creature that had sunk into the sea. Was it over? No. Stella, be careful behind you. Wong. Boom. Just as Margot's voice rang out, a deadly light suddenly rushed from the direction of the beach and hit Destruction Gauda's back. Despite having the protection of the positron reflector, the Destruction Gundam had already lost its ability to resist the laser attack due to the fact that it had directly taken on the attack of the Super Heavy Light class and killed the third Super Heavy Light class in one go. Due to the fact that the battery pack was almost depleted, the Destruction Gundam could no longer withstand the laser attack. The only thing he could rely on was the VPS armor that he was equipped with. But it was just drinking poison to quench his thirst. Balls of flames continued to explode on Destruction Gauda's back. The violent impact made Stella unable to control Destruction Gauda's posture as she helplessly watched the steel giant fall into the sea. Looks like this is all you've got. Human. Stella, who was struggling to get Destruction Gauda out of the sea, suddenly heard such a voice. The voice was cold and chilling, with a trace of inquiry, a trace of mockery, and more contempt. Who's talking? Stella saw a figure amidst the huge waves created by the Destruction Gundam rushing out of the sea. It was about 18 meters tall, and other than its human-like face, its body was covered in countless scales. It also had a pair of strange wings on its back that looked like the wings of a demon from a mythical story. Monster? You're the leader of those monsters. Stella, who witnessed this strange scene, subconsciously spoke. Correct. Then, I'll grant you death. A slightly stronger insect. The cold and chilling voice echoed in Stella's mind, and it controlled Stella's thoughts and her every move, making her unable to move. She could not react to the figure that was approaching Destruction Gauda. She could only watch it get closer and closer until it raised its right hand and placed it on Destruction Gauda's cockpit. Is this the hiding place of you bugs? Interesting. The figure chuckled softly. The laughter was so contemptuous and cold, but Stella still felt nothing, and she did not even react to Margot's voice. Stella, get out of the way. Margot, who was leading the crew to block the besieging beta, sent out a series of messages, but there was no response. Oh, is there a bug over there that's worried about you? Fine, I'll let you die together. The figure just gently pushed its hand, and Destruction Gauda's cockpit cover shattered into pieces on the spot, completely exposing Stella in front of the figure. Hee, what a cute insect. The insects in this world are really cruel. They let such a cute insect sit in this killing machine. I really can't do it. That being said, the figure's movements did not slow down at all. As the cockpit cover disintegrated, Stella's pilot uniform also began to disintegrate. The disintegration speed was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, the disintegration had spread to Stella's body. Yes, what the figure wanted was to watch the cute insect in front of it disintegrate bit by bit in front of it. This was the source of the witch's torture. She wanted to make all her enemies wail in pain in front of her eyes, or be like puppets with strings pulled, until they completely disintegrated. However, there were still people in this world who would not let her succeed. Buzz! A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky and blasted straight at the figure. Whoosh! In an instant, the lightning that descended from the sky pierced through the figure, but it did not push anything or any life into the netherworld. You're here, night from another world. A bone-chilling voice surged through the sky. A murderous gaze stared at Destruction Gauda's cockpit, at the steel body that suddenly appeared and blocked Destruction Gauda's cockpit behind it. Elizabeth! A man's voice sounded. It came from the steel body. Elizabeth? Huh, I'm not that high and mighty warrior princess. Night from another world. Ray Minkai. You've got the wrong person. A cold, killing intent soared into the sky. As the figure disappeared like a shadow, ripples appeared on the steel body. It was actually a sign that the figure had brazenly launched an attack. Oh, is this the subspace shield that Elizabeth mentioned? Interesting. Night from another world. My name is Doris Moros. Let me experience the power of the night that even the warrior princess praised. The cold voice sounded like thunder. As if it had activated some kind of power, it led the figure named Doris Moros to completely release its scales. Look, Night, this is the supreme creation that surpasses the brain and controls countless beta individuals, the ultimate biological body. Nidhogg. As Doris's voice surged, thousands of stars had already enveloped Destruction Gauda and the steel body that was protecting it. Fly, my family. The ripples appeared again. However, these ripples protected Destruction Gauda as well, preventing it from being attacked by Nidhogg. You're not Elizabeth. The light wings flapped rapidly. The steel giant, named Lancelot, Sword of the King, shuttled through the thousands of stars scattered by the enemy, like lightning. It waved the sword in its hand and slashed at Nidhogg. Bang! The crisp and loud sound of metal clashing resounded through the sky, and it also became a signal for the thousands of stars to stop scattering. Interesting. Night from another world. Nidhogg suddenly exerted his strength and forced Lancelot, Sword of the King, to retreat. At the same time, he also made the thousands of scales turn around and surround him. He looked down at Lancelot, Sword of the King, like a general commanding a magnificent army. It seems that you're worthy of our attack. Ray Minkai sensed that something was wrong from that bone-chilling voice. However, his instincts were faster than his thoughts. Lancelot, Sword of the King's light wings suddenly retracted. A second after the body was affected by gravity and fell rapidly, it spread out its light wings again with all its might. It quickly rotated and pulled up to avoid the attack from behind. When the afterimage left behind by Lancelot, Sword of the King, shattered, another figure suddenly appeared. It formed a triangle with Doris's Nidhogg and sealed off all paths of escape for Lancelot, Sword of the King. We meet again. Night from another world. Ray Minkai. It was the same body, but it had a different voice. 2 against 1. The so-called warrior princess is also so unprincipled. Ray Minkai did not seem surprised by the appearance of the second figure, which was Elizabeth. In war, there is no benevolence, no morality. There is only victory. Do it. Night from another world. In this war, there is only life and death. There is no other way. Chapter 887. Quick, quick, fill the position. Those monsters are coming up. At the place where the Archangel fell, the monsters that came like a tide had already surrounded the place. If it weren't for the crew of the Archangel trying their best to resist the invasion of these monsters, the ship would have been destroyed long ago. This isn't the way. Those large individuals haven't appeared yet. Just dealing with these small individuals has already consumed half of our ammunition. Bucky Lulu looked back at the ammunition rescued from the wreckage, and her expression became more and more dignified. Hold on. Stella will be back soon. After changing the magazine, she subconsciously looked up at the place where Destruction Gouda was. In the end, there was still no change. Destruction Gouda, which should have been activated again, didn't move for a long time, standing in place like a dead statue. And in front of Destruction Gouda, no, in the sky in front, a fierce battle was unfolding. From the glimpse, just now, Margaret had clearly recognized that the mysterious light wing aircraft that saved Destruction Gouda should be an ally, and the other two huge figures that seemed to be unknown creatures were likely to be the ones behind the scenes controlling these monsters. Hold on, Nader. Maybe the reinforcements are already here. She raised her gun and fired at the scarlet figures that were rushing over. Looking at the scarlet figure that was shot into a hornet's nest by Margaret, Bucky Lulu gritted her teeth, but her expression changed again. What she was worried about had finally happened. Behind the small individual, several huge figures at least 10 meters tall, swinging several stone hammers, were rushing over while stepping on the thick smoke. Rocket launcher! Rocket launcher! Get the rocket launcher! As soon as they saw the big guys, everyone's nerves suddenly tensed up. Everyone understood that as long as even one of these big guys rushed into the line of defense established by the wreckage of the Archangel, all of them would inevitably die. Nader, you command. I'm responsible for intercepting those small individuals. As soon as she saw the appearance of those big guys, the small individuals rushed up again, and Margaret made a prompt decision and divided the work. Okay, granted. However, before Bucky Lulu could make the arrangements, the roar of an engine came from the sky. Boom! Suddenly, 3 black shadows tore through the air and descended from the sky with the force of Mount Tai. They actually crushed the 3 big monsters wielding stone hammers into pieces in one breath. This scene startled Maul, Bucky Lulu, and the others. Then are they allies? Silver hair fluttering in the wind. It was like the steel armor of a holy knight. Compared to the MS they were familiar with, it was much shorter and had a much slimmer body. He actually appeared in the battlefield in such a shocking manner. That was the M9X that had been further modified after the Ob defense. Euros 6, Euros 7. Report the status of the body. Melissa Mao's voice rang out from the leading M9X. There is nothing wrong with the body. The Lambda drive system is operating normally. Same, nothing unusual. Saglia Sosuke and Cruz made their reports one after another. Good. According to the original plan. Euros 7. Clean up the surrounding BETs with me. Euros 6. Assist the crew of the Archangel in evacuating. Understood. Under Melissa Mao's order, Saglia Sosuke and Cruz moved one after another, ignoring the fierce battle on the Gauda's side. In the midst of the flames, the many BETs that almost sent the Archangel and the others to the underworld were all strangled. The ease with which it was done surprised Maul and the others. This was especially true for the layer of faintly discernible light film. It was able to successfully block the tank level who attempted to rely on their powerful jumping ability to launch a surprise attack. Sometimes, this layer of faintly discernible light film could even generate a powerful wind to strangle the densely packed BTs to death. Yo, everyone on the Archangel, it's time to end the outing. At this time, the M9X driven by Cruz came in front of Maul and the others. Natale, organize the people and retreat. Maul made a prompt decision. She did not care about the identity of Cruz and the others and decisively gave the order to retreat. In fact, before the defense was organized, Maul and Bucky Lulu had already arranged for the retreat. It was just that they had been besieged by the BETs and had not been able to implement it. The arrival of Melissa Mao and the other two finally gave Maul and the others an opportunity to retreat. The roar of the engine sounded from the broken Naku of the Archangel. The vehicles carrying all the crew of the Archangel drove to the other side of Paradise Island under the cover of Cruz. Big sister, everyone on the Archangel has evacuated. As soon as Cruz gave the signal, Melissa Mao immediately said, Ura's 7 retreat. Cover the evacuation of the Archangel and the others. Understood. Saglia Sosuke responded. He immediately turned around and then accelerated to the next node of the evacuation route of Maul and the others. There was a group of assault-level BETs rushing toward them. Lambda drive system, start. Saglia Sosuke did not retreat. Instead, he moved forward. He drove the M9X and raised his hands in a blocking posture. In the next second, it was as if the assault grade had crashed into an invisible wall. The hard shell on its head, which could withstand a 36mm assault cannon, was smashed into pieces. Fresh blood flowed out like a fountain. Looking at the bloody scene in front of him, Saglia Sosuke calmly responded. His spiritual power, which had been active since the start of the battle, suddenly burst out. Boom! A violent shockwave erupted from the M9X's palms. Like a pair of unstoppable giant hands, the shockwave overturned all the assault-grade monsters that attempted to smash the M9X into pieces. It even caused these enormous monsters to tumble in the air like kites with their strings cut. In the end, they were torn apart and turned into a pile of meaningless flesh and blood. What kind of power is this? Everyone who saw this scene could not help but be stunned. The assault-level BETs that could kill an armored force with just one charge were defeated just like that. The other party just raised his hand and got rid of these terrifying assault-level BETs. Which force does this belong to? Buggy Lulu pressed down on his military cap that was almost blown away by the wind. He subconsciously looked at the 3M9XS that were covering him and the others as they retreated. On this side, Archangel and the others had already safely retreated under the cover of Melissa Mao and the other two. However, Raymond Kai's side was caught in a fierce battle. The scales that flew all over the sky were constantly attacking from unexpected positions, or shooting out fatal beams, or swarming like lightning, using the sharp blades to cut Lancelot King's sword into thousands of pieces. Fortunately, these attacks were all defeated in front of Lancelot King's subspace shield. TSK, Elizabeth, that subspace shield is very annoying. Didn't you have the same sword before? In the sky, Nidhogg, who was transformed by Doris, appeared from the clouds. Destroy. Although Elizabeth did not launch many attacks, every attack just happened to control Lancelot King's sword's range of activity within a range. In particular, as the fierce battle continued, Elizabeth became more and more aware that Lancelot King's sword's subspace shield was not as powerful as she thought. Kai, be careful. Those two ugly monsters seemed to have noticed the weakness of the subspace shield. Of course, while Elizabeth was observing the weakness of Lancelot King's sword, Raymond Kai's side naturally had people observing their every move. The golden pupils of the White Cat State Zero reflected the outline of the two biological Nidhogg. Every second, every minute, the White Cat State Zero was calculating their movements, especially the scales that were flying all over the sky. The White Cat State Zero paid more attention to these scales. If it were not for Lancelot King's sword's subspace shield, which was almost a bug-level defense, it was inevitable that they would have fallen into a bitter battle. Dance! My family. The other party had flying scales. They also had armed compound flying wings. Although in terms of numbers, there was an extreme disparity. But in terms of power, Ray Minkai did not believe that those scales that only flew a few rounds back and forth before returning to recharge would be stronger than Lancelot King's sword's armed compound flying wings. Buzz! Buzz! In a rapid, buzzing sound, dozens and hundreds of sparks bloomed in the sky. Behind the blossoming sparks were the scales that were constantly being destroyed by the armed compound flying wings, and Doris's solemn face. Elizabeth, kill this kid with all your might. Weren't you the one who wanted to play the old trick just now? You're a sadistic witch. Elizabeth's gaze fell on Doris's body. The rings of light quietly lit up. This was the characteristic of the scales when they regenerated. But although the scales could be regenerated, it consumed a lot of biomass. Although Nidhogg was an existence that surpassed the level of a brain, The biomass that he could store was limited by his body size and could not be carried too much. I'm just tired of playing. At this moment, the wind became extremely cold. It was as if winter had descended, ending everything in the world. Even Margaret and the others, who had been a distance away, could feel the bone-deep chill. Needless to say, Ray Minkai, who was in the center of the cold wave. It's coming. Ray Minkai's eyes flashed, and he directly increased the output of the Aldnoah reactor to the limit. At the same time, he completely released the limiter of the armed compound flying wings. Buzz, buzz, buzz. In an instant, the sky that was about to be frozen exploded with deafening buzzing sounds. This was the joy of the armed compound flying wings being completely released. It was also the announcement that Doris had completely released her scales and killed the enemy. Then, in the sky that was occupied by sparks, Lancelot King's sword took the lead and charged towards Doris in the sky. To catch bandits, first catch the leader. As long as he got rid of Doris, who had released her scales, Lancelot King's sword would be able to deal with his old friend, Elizabeth, calmly. Chapter 888. Amidst the flames that filled the sky, 3 streams of light hovered above this world, entangling, scattering the light that was filled with the aura of death and tearing apart the beta that was all over the mountains and plains. What a fast speed! Captain Lancelot, Sword of the King, is in a fierce battle with the enemy's newly appeared individuals. In the bridge of the Minerva, Mei Ling looked at the speed marked on the screen in front of her in surprise. After Talia heard this, she nodded slightly. Launch the rescue operation according to the original plan. The Minerva will maintain a high altitude and must not be exposed to the light-level shooting range. In addition, inform True, Ray, and Luna Maria to never approach the battlefield where Lancelot, Sword of the King, is. After a pause, Talia said with a solemn gaze, "That is hell." Hell. The scene that appeared in front of True Flying Bird, Ray, and Luna Maria, who had completed the landing and launched the rescue operation, was hell. Looking forward from their position, the first thing they saw was the battlefield where humans and Beta were entangled with each other. That tragic scene, the battlefield was badly mutilated, was stimulating the nerves of the trio. But what was even more terrifying was the battlefield where Lancelot, Sword of the King, and the 2 Nidhogg's were. To be precise, it was not the battlefield that True Flying Bird knew, because the range of this battle had already spread from 1,000 meters high to the ground and then to the sea. As long as it was within the range of this island, it would definitely be the battlefield between these 3 terrifying mecha. Luna Maria, we must move faster. Otherwise, we will be affected. Ray slowly exhaled and forced himself not to pay attention to the horror of the battlefield. Yes, move quickly. True shook his head and tried hard to pull his gaze back to the mission in front of him. Okay, understood. High in the sky, there were roars. It was the roar produced by the mecha's high-speed flight, and the shock waves set off. It was also a symbol of fierce battle. Boom! The blade cut through the sky and slashed at Elizabeth, but she dodged at the last moment. Elizabeth, do you only have 1 sword? After repeatedly commanding the scales to besiege Lancelot, Sword of the King, and failing, Doris once again reprimanded Elizabeth. No, how can that kind of blade be so easily touched? Facing Lancelot King's sword's subspace shield, Elizabeth also had a headache. If she still had her subspace blade, she wouldn't be in such a predicament. But I've already seen through that mech's trick. Doris, change targets. The moment Elizabeth's mental waves rippled, Doris already knew what she meant. As a result, the scales that were flying around Lancelot King's swords suddenly changed. They actually aimed their guns and blades at the armed composite wings that were attacking in all directions. Furthermore, he had destroyed most of the armed composite wings in the air at lightning speed. Boom! As the armed composite wings turned into huge fireballs, the cockpit of the Lancelot King's sword was plunged into darkness. It was a meaningless snowflake after the image disappeared, as well as the sounds that assaulted one's ears. They were all telling Ray Minkai that Lancelot King's sword's weakness after activating the subspace shield had been seen through. "Kai, we've been seen through." The white cat State Zero licked its paws and smiled with interest. "I expected it." In this regard, Ray Minkai was not surprised at all. It was not impossible for the enemy to see through the weakness of the subspace shield. If the subspace shield could be relied on to get rid of the Parliament of Destiny's right-hand man, the Parliament of Destiny would have been destroyed by the Authority long ago. ALDNOH, in the name of Ray. Subspace. No, the dimensional barrier system is offline, and the Tarsus system is activated. It was slow to say, but quick to do. Before the fireballs from the armed composite wings explosion had dissipated, Lancelot King's sword body was suffused with a black yet not black colored light. The thick smoke rolled and wrapped Lancelot King's sword in it. But Elizabeth stared at the slightest change. Success. Doris. When the faint smoke with a trace of sparks diffused from Lancelot King's sword's body, but did not encounter the subspace that swallowed everything, Elizabeth knew that her speculation was correct. Understood. Under Doris's order, the scales that had destroyed the last armed composite wings transformed into the most ferocious wolf pack and launched a fierce attack on Lancelot King's sword. The beam of light, the cold light that flashed on the blade, blocked all paths of Lancelot King's sword. But the result was beyond Doris's expectations. Doris, who had taken advantage of the opportunity when the armed composite wings were destroyed, was surprised to find that the scales attack did not touch the opponent at all. "No, that's not a subspace shield." "Elizabeth." There was no response, but the person who should have responded had already rushed forward. Buzz. The moment the blade trembled and the sound of metal clashing rang in the air, Elizabeth and Lancelot King's sword exchanged a few rounds of attack and defense. Suddenly, Doris turned around and instinctively swung the blade at her back where there was no one. Bang! Sparks flew. It was Lancelot King's sword's blade that came slashing down. If Doris's instincts had not been triggered, she would have been injured if not dead. What shocked Doris even more was that when she blocked Lancelot King's sword attack and commanded the scales to besiege Lancelot King's sword, the opponent seemed to have known the angle of attack of the scales in advance. Like the path, he dodged all of them in advance and quickly widened the distance between them without any injuries. Precognitive ability? Although she was shocked, Doris quickly saw through the clues. "Elizabeth, looks like you didn't lose in vain last time." "Probably." With a flash, Elizabeth had already caught up to Lancelot King's sword, but she was caught in the same situation that Doris had just experienced. No matter how Elizabeth attacked, Lancelot King's sword would always be able to see through her actions and take the initiative to attack. There were a few times when he almost succeeded in hitting Elizabeth and severely injuring her. "Elizabeth, back off." Doris waved her right hand and countless scales flew in the air, attacking Lancelot King's sword from all directions. This was the largest attack that Doris had launched since the start of the battle, and it was also the largest attack that Ray Minkai had seen. From a number of scales detected by Lancelot King's sword, the number of scales had already exceeded 1,000. One could imagine how terrifying it would be to be hit and injured by these scales. State Zero, hold on tight. Ray Minkai's gaze changed, and his feet stepped on the pedals alternately. Lancelot King's sword rapidly lowered its altitude on the spot, dropping from 1,000 meters to the surface of the sea. At the same time, it coincidentally dodged the volley of scales that filled the sky. "Don't think that you can run away just like that." Doris glared, and the scales that filled the sky all turned around and chased after it like a pack of wolves. Whong! Boom! The light beam shot down like a rainstorm, creating pillars of water on the surface of the sea. The splashing seawater even enveloped Lancelot King's sword and slid down from the top of its head, along the outer armor all the way down. It either dripped back onto the surface of the sea or was evaporated by the high temperature generated by the high-speed operation of the body. Woo woo woo. Lancelot King's sword speed was getting faster and faster, and a sharp roar that sounded like a dragon's roar resounded in the air. The scenery in front of Ray Minkai changed from blue to yellow, mixed with dazzling red at the beach. Lancelot King's sword had already flown from the surface of the sea to the beach that was occupied by countless betas after the fierce battle. However, Lancelot King's sword did not care about these betas that were still charging towards the base. However, the scales that were biting tightly behind Lancelot King's sword did not care about the betas below. They continued to lock on a Lancelot King's sword's figure and launched a frenzied attack. Light beam, sharp blade. At this moment, it was as if they had transformed into Lancelot King's sword's teammate, constantly piercing through and crushing the betas below. They crushed these ugly things that had defeated the defense line of the Paradise Island base, turning them into meaningless rotten meat. Lancelot King's sword's high-speed whistling sound swept past from afar, leading the thousands of scales to bring disaster to the sinful creatures below. Doris's expression became more and more ugly as the blood-colored flowers continued to bloom. "You actually used me to attack my soldiers." In less than a few minutes, nearly 1,000 betas died, tragically under the attack of the scales. Although these casualties were nothing to the betas, it was a resounding slap on Doris's face. Immediately after, the light wings on Lancelot King's sword's back retracted. With the kinetic energy given by inertia, he swung his sword in a roundhouse slash, cutting several interceptors into a pile of rotten meat. Lancelot King's sword stood on a broken bunker and pointed his sword at Doris. This was a provocation. It was even more disdainful of Doris's scale attack. The scales that were closely chasing Lancelot King's sword suddenly retreated and returned to Doris's body like swallows returning to their nest. "Knight, I have to admit that you do have the qualifications to make Elizabeth fail." But that's it. As soon as Doris's words fell, Nidhogg, who was supposed to be 1,000 meters high in the sky, suddenly disappeared. Raiminkai's heart was alarmed. With a move of his right hand, Lancelot King's sword instantly activated the radiation shield. Boom! Almost at the same time, a violent impact occurred, forcefully knocking Lancelot King's sword dozens of meters away. The Tarsus system did not foresee this attack. Chapter 889. The piercing pain transmitted from the cells occupied the nerves of Nidhogg that Doris had transformed into. She clenched her fists and felt the pain. She raised her head and looked at Lancelot King's sword, who was protected by the green light shield, and sneered. "I didn't expect you to have so many tricks up your sleeves. Without the subspace shield, there are still other energy shields." Likewise, just now that was a subspace jump, right? Faced with Doris's provocation, Lei Minkai smiled faintly and pointed out the matter that Doris wanted to hide. At that moment, the Tarsus system did not foresee Doris's actions. The reason was not because there was an error in the Tarsus system itself. It was because the Tarsus system could not foresee something that did not exist on Paradise Island or in this world. The Nidhogg that Doris had transformed and had truly disappeared from this world. The truth was that Doris's Nidhogg had the ability to jump in the real world with the help of the subspace. Oh! Doris's gaze changed slightly and then returned to normal. What a surprise! I didn't expect you to see through my Nidhogg's ability in just a moment. Before the cold voice fell, Nidhogg's figure disappeared again. He must have escaped into the subspace. You can hide in that layer of turtle shell, knife from another world. This is considered technology suppression, right? Kai. White Cat State Zero's voice seemed to have a hint of a smile. How do you feel? Knight, who has always relied on technology to suppress his opponent, has now met a troublesome enemy. Average. Ray Minkai was very calm. As a pilot who was proficient in using subspace technology, Ray Minkai naturally understood the characteristics of the subspace. Average. You must know that this is a technology that even your Martian princess has not mastered. White Cat State Zero's tail swayed slightly, but its mouth continued to tease Ray Minkai. Tarsus's prediction ability is powerful, but it cannot predict what happens in the subspace. So what should we do? Salad. What annoyed the White Cat State Zero was that Ray Minkai ignored its teasing and focused on dealing with Doris's elusive attacks. The cracks in the subspace took turns to open around Lancelot King's sword. Then, in 1/10 or even 1/100th of a second, a powerful and fatal attack erupted from the inside out, crazily bombarding Lancelot King's sword's radiation shield. It was not difficult to tell that Doris was definitely relying on the characteristics of the subspace to try and exhaust Lancelot King's sword to death. As the saying goes, hunting geese all day long is called the geese pecking at the eye. Ever since he obtained the authority to activate the LD Noah reactor and the subspace shield, Ray Minkai, who relied on the characteristics of the subspace shield to crush the enemy, eventually encountered the same treatment as the enemy. The waves of attacks that erupted from the cracks in the subspace bombarded the radiation shield like rolling waves that impacted Ray Minkai's hearing, vision, and even psychological defenses. If it were not for the current state of the radiation shield in front of Ray Minkai's eyes, he would have subconsciously thought that the radiation shield was about to be broken. In the radiation shield, the blade pierced through the air and pierced straight into the subspace crack that appeared behind Lancelot King's sword on the right side. However, from the feedback of the blade sensor, this attack did not seem to have any results. TSK, you run pretty fast. White Cat State Zero tilted its head and looked to the other side. At the same time, Lancelot King's sword also swung his sword in that direction. Bang! This time, the sound of metal clashing suddenly sounded. However, no figure appeared in front of Lancelot King's sword. Yes, over there. White Cat State Zero raised its paw and pointed. Lancelot King's sword turned his wrist, and the blade in his hand once again pierced in another direction. Bang! The crisp sound of metal clashing rang out once again. What's going on? In the subspace, Doris finally revealed a look of disbelief. Relying on the subspace jump, Doris had never encountered such a troublesome enemy. Murderous aura. Elizabeth's voice sounded in Doris's mind. Murderous aura. This guy can sense the murderous aura in the subspace. Are you kidding me? Elizabeth, don't use your old tricks to confuse me. We're just monsters now. The subspace crack shrank and Doris's figure once again disappeared from the subspace. However, all of this was under the gaze of White Cat State Zero. No, it was constantly being sensed by the White Cat State Zero. Murderous aura. It's as obvious as a light in the dark night. White Cat State Zero licked its lips, and the corners of its mouth were slightly raised. Maybe Kai will be confused, but the beast's instincts will not be confused. Although White Cat State Zero was a metallic life form, its essence was just a beast with a metallic life form. A ferocious beast that could destroy a city, a country, or even a continent. The sharp blade whistled through the air and struck Lancelot King's sword's back. Bang! At the critical moment, Lancelot King's sword turned his left hand and pulled out the sword to stab behind him, blocking the incoming blade. Elizabeth, you can't help but want to make a move? After the successful attack, Lancelot King's sword quickly turned and faced the direction of the attacker. He suddenly burst into speed and stabbed the attacker like lightning. I just can't watch anymore. The attacker was Elizabeth, who had not made a move after Doris's continuous attacks. Can't watch anymore? Ray Minkai mocked. Could it be that what you said before was just empty words? The silver-white waterfall slashed down from the sky and occupied most of Ray Minkai's vision. However, Ray Minkai did not care about the silver-white waterfall. Instead, he stepped on the pedal with his right foot, and Lancelot King's sword moved sideways to avoid the silver-white waterfall. Immediately after, he waved his right hand and led the blade in his hand to slash at Elizabeth's waist. In the blink of an eye, the silver-white waterfall revolved in front of Lancelot's sword of the king's chest, blocking the blade that was enough to cut Elizabeth in half at the critical moment. Bang! As the sound of gold and iron colliding exploded, both sides took a few steps back at the same time to increase the distance between them. Chance! Doris! As she retreated, Elizabeth's eyes moved and stared closely at Lancelot King's sword. She stared closely at the void behind Lancelot King's sword where nothing existed. Doris was hiding there, waiting for an opportunity. an opportunity that was enough to consign Lancelot King's sword to eternal damnation. At this moment, Lancelot King's sword, who was trying to increase the distance between him and Elizabeth, happened to have this opportunity. The subspace rift silently bloomed, and the fatal light locked onto Lancelot King's sword. Die. With this attack, Lancelot King's sword would definitely die. Roar. However, just as this fatal attack was about to pierce through the back armor of Lancelot King's sword and penetrate the cockpit where Ray Minkai was, an earth-shattering beast roar sounded and wantonly attacked Doris's sensory organs. Boom! A pair of sharp claws tore through the air and brazenly slammed against Doris's sure-kill attack. In an instant, the attack that could instantly pierce through steel was shattered into pieces by the pair of sharp claws like glass. What? Doris cried out in surprise, but before she could react, the sharp claws that suddenly appeared on the battlefield took advantage of the situation and slapped into the subspace rift she was in. The terrifying power contained in the sharp claws accurately bombarded Nidhogg, which Doris had transformed into, and blasted it out of the subspace. Boom! Sand and dust soared into the sky, and the surroundings were filled with energy reactions from the shattering of the subspace rift. In the center of this overflowing energy, Nidhogg, which Doris had transformed into, seemed a little powerless, and most of the scales on its body had cracked. The creature that had been controlling the scales to attack with its domineering aura was a little shaky, as if it had suffered great damage. How is this possible? You can actually expel me out of the subspace? You, what the hell are you? Her sharp gaze pierced through the billowing smoke and dust like a sharp sword, piercing towards the steel beast that stood proudly behind Lancelot King's sword and defeated her attack with one strike. However, the steel beast didn't answer Doris's question. It only used its actions to answer her question. The steel beast that had revealed its ferocious claws only had one goal, and that was to tear this creature with the ability to jump through subspace into pieces. Roar! The moment the beast's murderous roar swept up the sand and dust, it was the moment the steel beast pounced towards Doris. Kai, leave this guy to me. Okay. The steel beast that was fighting with Doris was the tusked lion, State Zero, which had liberated Sot's mechanical beast form. Although Ray Minkai did not know why State Zero was able to expel the enemy hidden in the subspace, it was not a big deal. At most, he could ask later. The most important thing was to get rid of the enemy in front of him. Elizabeth, who was also an enemy of Nyholt, did not help Doris when she was dragged into the fight by the fawn lion. Instead, she stood in place and watched everything happen as if she was an unimportant bystander. Is your partner finally willing to come out? Elizabeth looked at the billowing smoke and the monsters that were fighting. Partner? You're right. Now, no one is in our way. Let's continue the previous battle. Chapter 890. The two colors of red and white continued to collide in the air. Under the guidance of the two masters, they continued to attack each other with various killing moves, breaking through the opponent's defense and directly attacking the opponent's master. Amidst the sound of flesh being sliced apart, Lancelot King's sword quickly turned around, dodging Elizabeth's attack. At the same time, he secretly guided her to pierce through an interceptor grade that had mistakenly entered the battlefield. Do you think you can shake my spirit like this? Knight from another world. After raising her foot and kicking away the interceptor level that had lost its life, Elizabeth raised her sword and pointed at Lancelot King's sword. No, I've never thought of it that way. When Ray Minkai's response sounded, Lancelot King's sword had already held the second radiation vibration longsword in his left hand. Dual swords. Looking at Lancelot King's sword's movements, Elizabeth seemed to think for a moment. Then, her left hand opened and closed, and a second longsword appeared and was held in her hand. Although these swords are not as good as the ones you are using, they're not far off. If you say that, it will make me feel that I have an unfair advantage. However, Elizabeth did not agree with Ray Minkai's modesty. There is only victory on the battlefield. Moreover, you have allowed me to pick up a second sword for a long time. For this, I have to thank you." As her voice fell, Elizabeth attacked like a whirlwind. The blade was like the wind, setting off bursts of blood-colored storms. It had already struck Lancelot King's sword's radiation light shield. Its power was so heavy that it almost made Lancelot King's sword kneel on the ground. Buzz. Under the control of Ray Minkai, Lancelot King's sword fought back and blocked all of Elizabeth's tide-like attacks. He took the opportunity to seize Elizabeth's flaw and stabbed his sword towards Elizabeth's neck. Bang! The swords of both sides collided once again. Seeing that his attack did not succeed, Ray Minkai decisively retreated. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was even more unforgiving as she brandished her sword and chased after him. Under the wave after wave of whirlwind attacks, Lancelot, Sword of the King, retreated faster and faster, and he was getting closer and closer to the beta that was attacking the #1 main gate of the Paradise Island base. As the other passageways had been blown up by Jemingard's subordinates, only a few passageways, including the first main gate, could still be passed through. Most of the bets had placed their breakthrough point there. Therefore, when Lancelot, Sword of the King, and Elizabeth approached, at least thousands of bets had gathered at the first main gate. It was even possible that there were more than 10,000 bets gathered there. Schwa. The sword light was cold as it killed all the BETs that were either thrown or kicked in front of Lancelot King's sword. In the midst of blood, Elizabeth's incarnation, Nidhogg, brandished its sword and slashed an assault class, charging at it in half. Then it abruptly stomped its foot on the ground. Boom! Under Nidhogg's foot, the ground cracked, and the surrounding bets stopped moving as if they had received some order. They turned around and quickly retreated to both sides. In this endless torrent of bets, no bets dared to offend Lancelot, Sword of the King, and Nidhogg. Is this enough? Night. Elizabeth once again raised her sword and pointed at Lancelot, Sword of the King. This time, Ray Minkai finally responded to Elizabeth. He nodded slightly, and there was a hint of apology in his voice. That's enough. Also, thank you very much. It turned out that Ray Minkai was not unable to resist Elizabeth's attack just now. Instead, he used the method of diverting the disaster and secretly guided Elizabeth to rush into the Beta army that was attacking the Paradise Island base. Thank you? Haha, you don't have to thank me. It doesn't matter to me whether this human base is captured or not. Nidhogg waved his two swords and launched another attack amidst the whistling sound of the blades piercing through the air. This time, Lancelot, Sword of the King, no longer evaded. Instead, he adopted a head-on approach and fought with Nidhogg. Suddenly, amidst the whistling sound of the blades piercing through the air, Lancelot, Sword of the King, and Nidhogg had already engaged in no less than 100 exchanges. The silhouettes of both sides were constantly changing positions between attack and defense. Every time they changed positions, there would inevitably be bursts of dazzling bloody flowers splashing out. This did not come from Lancelot, Sword of the King, or the blood on Nidhogg's body, but from the continuous withdrawal of bets from the Paradise Island base. This was the blood of the bets that had been affected by the aftermath of the battle between the first two. But this was no longer important. In the eyes of both sides, there was only each other and the thought of killing the person in front of them. Moreover, the power that both sides could use was actually the sword in their hands, using the purest combat skills to fight. As for the other side, the scene seemed to be much bigger. Doris, who was forcibly expelled from the subspace by the long-fanged Lion Zero, was unwilling, but her thoughts quickly calmed down. As why Elizabeth said before, this steel lion that suddenly appeared was probably Ray Minkai's last trump card. It's just a beast with a little strange power. Doris flapped the wings behind her back and quickly rose into the air, trying to rely on the advantage of the air to suppress the long-fanged Lion Zero. However, it seemed that maybe even why Elizabeth, who had a brief encounter with the long-fanged Lion Zero, did not know the power of the long-fanged Lion Zero. So what if you can fly? Seeing Doris quickly rising into the air and widening the distance between them so that its fangs and claws were useless, the long-fanged Lion Zero laughed instead of being angry. Roar! In the midst of the earth-shattering roar, the long-fanged Lion Zero's body flashed with white light, and in the blink of an eye, it was replaced with a heavy, dark green armor. Doris, who was in the air, clearly saw the ground at the feet of the long-fanged Lion Zero being torn apart by spiderweb-like cracks in an instant. What's going on? Doris, who instinctively felt that something was wrong, wanted to widen the distance again in an attempt to stay away from the long-fanged Lion Zero that was tearing the ground around it. However, two terrifying beams of light arrived in a flash and directly bombarded Doris's body. Fortunately, Doris's instincts saved her once again. At the moment when the beams of light were about to hit Doris, the scales on her chest were all peeled off and gathered to form a defensive net in a flash. It forcibly blocked the two beams of light that almost seriously injured Doris and could even take her life. However, the long-fanged Lion Zero's killing move was far more than just two beams of light. Take this. Behind the beams of light, dozens of miniature missiles rose into the air, under the cover of the afterglow left behind by the beams of light in this world. They swarmed over and launched a second wave of attacks on Doris, who did not have time to regenerate her scales. Boom! Boom! A series of explosions engulfed Doris. Seeing that Doris's position was still submerged by the miniature missiles, the long-fanged Lion Zero did not stop because of this, nor did it have the intention to stop. Under its control, wave after wave of miniature missiles were like poisonous bees that entered attack mode. They fearlessly plunged into the tumbling sea of fire and searched for the figure that vowed to die. Then, there was a huge roar that led to the underworld. Rumble, wave after wave, the long-fanged Lion Zero never cared about how many miniature missiles it had launched. It only knew that if it wanted to fight, it must kill the enemy. Otherwise, Suddenly, the long-fanged Lion Zero's body crazily released the sound of mechanical locks being opened. At the same time, the moment the heavy dark green armor landed on the ground, the dark mechanical beast that was surrounded by it suddenly leaped, just in time to avoid the attack from behind. It turned out that the long-fanged Lion Zero's sea of missiles did not defeat Doris. Instead, it was used by the opponent. Using the long-fanged Lion Zero's line of sight to block, she once again entered the subspace and waited for an opportunity to launch a surprise attack. Unfortunately, Doris's plan was seen through by the long-fanged Lion Zero. Green, black, form change. In the subspace, Doris, who saw the long-fanged Lion Zero wearing the dark green armor change into a black form to avoid the attack, decisively made a move to prevent the long-fanged Lion Zero from having any new tricks. But this was also within the long-fanged Lion Zero's calculations. As the black mechanical beast nimbly flipped in midair, a layer of faint light suffused its body as it pounced toward the subspace rift that Doris was in like a cannonball. This time, it must be the reappearance of the previous scene. The fiery red streamer fell from the sky and completely destroyed the crack that did not belong to this world. At the same time, it also expelled the enemy hidden in it, forcing it to appear in this world again. The dancing flames wantonly crisscrossed on the scales. The tingling pain from the flesh and nerves made Doris aware of the scene in front of her. The beast in front of her changed from a dark green form to a black form, and then turned into a meteor in mid-air, forcing her to fall out of the subspace once again. Was real. What the hell are you? You can actually affect the subspace again and again. Nidhogg, who was Doris's incarnation, clenched the fiery red sword in front of him. However, the only response he got was another fiery red sword slashing down. The cold light suddenly bloomed, and Doris actually mobilized the energy of the scales on her body again and directly bombarded the second fiery red sword. The terrifying energy explosion on the spot, with the long-fanged Lion Zero and Nidhogg as the center, turned into hell on the spot. In the turbulent energy torrent, Doris jumped out and landed a few hundred meters away with injuries. She looked solemnly at the energy storm that was still rolling and still strangling everything. This attack almost used up all the power of the Nidhogg that she had transformed into. Hum! Suddenly, accompanied by a soft mechanical hum, a ferocious steel beast that seemed to be wrapped in flames slowly and forcefully stepped out, once again appearing before Doris's eyes. Roar! At this moment, the steel beast made a noise that seemed to suppress the energy storm. It was more like a roar that declared its power. It was the long-fanged lion Zero, Zenaida. Chapter 891. What kind of monster is this? It had changed into at least 3 forms, and each form was able to restrain Doris's actions. Whether it was subspace jump, high-altitude bombing, or close-range combat, they were all suppressed. Could it be that this iron lion was the perfect body? Or the perfect creature? How is this possible? Now, whether it was Doris herself or Nidhogg, who was transformed by Elizabeth, they were created using the biotechnology of Beta and the technology given by MRA. This was the perfect creature in Doris's mind. And this strange iron lion that could change its form at any time according to the battle situation had reached such a level. Elizabeth, why didn't you tell me that this iron lion could transform? Doris's spirit was surging as she questioned Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth ignored Doris's reproach. TSK, this damn knight's principle. There was no other reason. Elizabeth had put all her attention into the battle with Ray Minkai and Lancelot King's sword. He did not leave any room to deal with Doris. Doris, who did not get any answers, was furious on the spot, but there was nothing she could do. What's more, Longfang Lion State Zero was not the kind that would only take a beating and not attack. As soon as it saw Doris's movements slow down, Longfang Lion State Zero immediately seized the opportunity. As the fiery red stream of light rose, the steel lion charged out and pounced straight at Doris. When Doris reacted, Longfang Lion State Zero's fiery red blade was already in front of her eyes. Bang! Sparks burst out from the blade, scattered in the air, and finally disappeared in front of Doris's eyes. It was that pair of wings. Oh, I didn't expect your wings to be so hard. Longfang Lion State Zero flipped over and landed on the ground, saying sarcastically. The flesh wings spread out, revealing Doris's right hand that was holding the long sword, and also revealing Doris's surprised expression. You can talk? An individual with an independent consciousness. Are you surprised? Have you never seen a metal life form before? Longfang Lion State Zero raised its head proudly, and the golden beast's eyes were filled with sarcasm. Yes, very surprising, but it will soon turn into scrap metal. Let's give it a try. Before his voice fell, beams of light scattered in the air, trying to block the movements of the long-fanged lion. For this, Doris did not hesitate to use almost all of her scales. She was very clear. As long as she gave a little more time and a little more opportunity, this iron lion would definitely pull out a hidden card that she didn't know about. The blazing light fell from the sky, drawing a deadly and hot trace on the ground, as if to create a death cage for the long-toothed lion, completely trapping it in this world. Buzz, as expected. At the moment when these airtight light beams hit the long-toothed lion Zero, a layer of familiar light shield impressively appeared around the long-toothed lion Zero, effortlessly blocking all the light beams. As soon as she saw the light shield, Doris turned around abruptly and saw Lancelot King's sword raising the radiation shield on his arm to block Elizabeth's stab. The same technique. If it weren't for Nidhogg's lack of facial nerves, Doris's eyelids would have been twitching at this moment. Lancelot King's sword had the technique. So did Long-Tooth Lion Zero. In that case, did he also have the extremely troublesome subspace shield? As her thoughts turned, Doris once again escaped into the subspace. This time, even with the protection of the radiation shield, Long-Tooth Lion Zero could not rush out of the dense and terrible light beam storm and expel Doris from the subspace. Did she run away? In the light beam storm, Long-Tooth Lion Zero stared at the rapidly disappearing subspace crack until he could no longer sense Doris's existence. Then he turned around to look at Lancelot King's sword. Kai's side is not a big problem, and he doesn't need my help. After pondering for a moment, Long-Toothed Lion Zero raised his head and looked at the flying scales that still did not stop because of Doris's departure. Annoying flies. The fiery red light that rose again turned into dark green flames in the blink of an eye. Then, hundreds of miniature missiles broke through the dark green flames and accurately and quickly shot down all the scales that were flying in the sky. It was the end of this slightly anticlimactic battle. Taking advantage of the gap between the two sides, Ray Minkai smiled after receiving the message that Long-Toothed Lion Zero was chasing after the beta. It seems that your partner has escaped. Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth was unmoved. She just turned her wrist, flashed her sword, and said indifferently, "This is a battle that only determines victory and defeat, and only matters of life and death. Continue." These words made Ray Minkai frown. Elizabeth seemed to be implying something, but Ray Minkai could not see through the mystery behind it for a while. And Elizabeth did not give Ray Minkai any time to see through her trick. Under her wave after wave of ferocious attacks, the only thing Ray Minkai could do was to concentrate and use everything he had learned to win this night's duel. Between the two swords, Doris staggered out of the subspace and fell into a dim space. A stream of blood flowed down from her body full of scars, forming a pool of blood in the blink of an eye. "You still dare to come back?" In the darkness, a voice that could freeze the minds of most creatures slowly sounded. He was the culprit that affected Elizabeth's life and destroyed Elizabeth's hometown. Mr. Doris was cold all over the moment, and it was difficult for her to think. Sir, that Iron Lion is too strange. I tried everything, but I couldn't hurt it all. So you ran back?" "No, I just asked Sir to allow me to liberate Nidhogg. Just because of this, you dared to abandon Elizabeth, run back here alone, and beg me to liberate you?" A black shadow flashed, and Doris, who fell on the ground, floated in the air. At the same time, Nidhogg, who did not have many facial nerves, showed an expression of extreme pain. "No, sir, I just... oomph." A cold snort sounded, and Nidhogg, who was 18 meters tall, fell to the ground. Mr. A's cold gaze swept across Nidhogg's body full of scars, and once again focused on the only source of light in the darkness, the surveillance screen from Paradise Island. On the screen, Nidhogg, who was transformed by Elizabeth, was fighting fiercely with Lancelot Kingsword. From the looks of the battle, Elizabeth and Lancelot Kingsword were evenly matched. But from a situation of Elizabeth's Nidhogg, it was only a matter of time before Elizabeth lost or even died in battle. Compared to Lancelot Kingsword, who had a steel body and an energy shield, Elizabeth, who purely relied on the strength of the biological body to fight, might be at a disadvantage from the beginning. Looking at the increasing number of scars on Elizabeth's body, Mr. F finally sighed. After all, in his heart, Elizabeth was far more important than Doris. Otherwise, it would not have saved Elizabeth when she was on the verge of death when Lei Ming-Kai and the Long-Toothed Lion joined hands to attack her. Liberate, go, and support Elizabeth. If anything happens to her, it will be your death. Yes. Thank you for your kindness, sir. Doris agreed respectfully and was ready to welcome the liberation. Nidhogg, this biological body, which was born from the fusion of beta biotechnology and Mr. A's unique technology, must have its final trump card. However, this final trump card was in the hands of Mr. A. Every time Nidhogg was liberated, it must be approved by Mr. A. In the darkness, Mr. A raised his finger and pointed at Doris. An imperceptible energy wave shot out and hit Nidhogg, which was Doris's incarnation. In an instant, it triggered the huge power hidden in Nidhogg's body, guiding it to break through the shackles and finally achieve liberation. An incomparably tragic scream sounded from Nidhogg's mouth, echoing in this dim space. A surge of turbulent energy wandered in Nidhogg's body, frantically transforming this biological body, turning it into the world's most ferocious killer. The graceful body became extremely ferocious. Bone spikes shot out of his body one after another. The most conspicuous thing was that the pair of flesh wings behind it quickly shed flesh and blood, completely turning into a pair of terrifying bone wings. That scene could be described as scalp-numbing. But Doris was unmoved. Perhaps she was already used to it. Perhaps, suddenly, Doris, who was supposed to be waiting for the liberation to end, suddenly had a fierce look in her eyes. She clenched her fists, and Nidhogg, who was about to be liberated, disappeared without a trace. Immediately after, before Mr. A could react, Nidhogg appeared behind him and reached out to grab him. "You're courting death." Doris, looking at the pair of hands that caught him, gradually shed flesh and revealed pale bones. Mr. A was abnormally calm. "No, dear Mr. A, Mr. A. From the moment I became like this, I was already dead. I've been waiting for a long time." Doris knew where Mr. A's confidence came from. She also knew that as long as Mr. A was willing, this Nidhogg with his terrifying power would definitely be turned into nothing in an instant. However, this was the chance she had been waiting for a long time. An opportunity that she had waited for who knew how many years and paid the price of at least 6 trillion lives. It was an opportunity that allowed Doris and even Elizabeth to endure the wails of the living beings in their homeworld who had died tragically for countless days and nights before they were able to seize it. An opportunity that was enough to consign Mr. A to eternal damnation. "You can't kill me. You can't even hurt me." Just as Doris expected, Mr. A, who controlled Nidhogg's life and death, was still as calm as ever. However, Doris laughed out loud. "No, I don't need to hurt you, and I don't need to kill you. I just need to make sure you don't run away." In the next second, a bright purple light that was like the sun broke through the darkness that enveloped the area and engulfed Doris and Mr. A. It was not until she saw with her own eyes that Embark. It was completely swallowed by the purple light and was unable to escape death that Doris silently muttered in her heart. "That's right. We've finally been liberated. Elizabeth, my old enemy, my best friend, I'll be waiting for you on the road to hell." Chapter 892. In the bridge of the son of Dan's slave, it was quiet and tense. Everyone's eyes were focused on everything displayed on the big screen. An eye-catching target marked as U1 was locked on. 4 high-speed targets lined up from 1 to 4, starting with the letter L respectively. There was some kind of connection between them, an enemy relationship. U1 was the unknown coordinates contained in a mysterious signal that suddenly appeared in the communication channel of the son of Dan's slave half an hour ago. Under Teresa's order, the intelligence department of the son of Dan's slave quickly combined it with the surrounding terrain, hydrology, sonar data, and many other data, and came up with a result. The enemy's base camp was probably in one of the underwater valleys that the result pointed to. It was false information. Or was it Ray Minkai, the Elizabeth, that Teresa was waiting for to provide the truth? The results of many thoughts flashed through Teresa's mind, but in the end, they all fell on the same result. Watching the battle between Lei Minkai and Elizabeth, as well as the battle between State Zero and Doris, Teresa finally made up her mind after silently watching Doris's faint and disappearing without trace. Launch Freya, target 330,613. Attack mode selected Deep Sea mode. With the order, Teresa slowly exhaled and leaned back on the chair. Madukas. I don't like this feeling. Richard Madukas, who was standing next to Teresa, nodded slightly. Captain, I don't like this feeling either. But for now, maybe this is the most appropriate plan. Is it appropriate? But Paradise Island has already suffered a great loss. After Teresa silently muttered this sentence, she threw all her worries to the back of her mind and waited for the moment to come. For Freya dragged a long tail of smoke as they rose from the son of Dan's slave. They changed their flight posture at an altitude of 1,000 meters and flew toward the target that had already been locked on, a certain underwater valley that was dozens of kilometers away. In less than a few minutes, the first Freya would detonate 30 seconds after entering the water. The powerful water pressure caused by the explosion would destroy the enemy's defense line around the underwater valley, making it easier for the three Freya to accurately hit the target. This was a tacit action. It was an operation that had never appeared in the battle plans of the Son of Danslave. Among the Sons of Danslaves, there were less than 5 people who knew the reason for the 4 Freyas to attack. After all, the hidden truth was enough to shock these soldiers who had fought with the Beta many times. No one would have thought that the enemy hiding behind Beatum would secretly plot a rebellion. And this existence just so happened to be Elizabeth, who had almost died under Rei Minkai's sword. I have to say, their acting skills are very real. Looking at the battle between Rei Minkai and Elizabeth again, the two of them were locked in a stalemate. Acting skills? Perhaps they're just looking for a way for them to die. Richard Mardukas seemed to have seen through something. Is that so? Just as Teresa was about to say something, the 4 Freya missiles launched earlier entered the detonation stage. A bright purple radiance burst out from the depths of the sea, engulfing the surrounding seawater. This was the movement of the first Freya detonation. After that, the second ray of light rose into the sky along the cavity created by the first Freya after it detonated and swallowed the seawater, forming a pillar of light that soared into the sky. It also exposed the scene hidden deep in the underwater valley. It was a huge building that was incomparably huge just by looking at it with the naked eye. Its hive. When Teresa saw the huge building, her right hand suddenly clenched. At this point, Teresa's heart was mostly settled. This slightly rash action plan had taken a successful step forward. Boom! As soon as the pillar of light caused by the second Freya disappeared, the third Freya followed closely behind, completely erasing the huge building in the underwater valley from the map in one fell swoop, revealing the location that was hidden deeper in the sea. That was where the target was. At this moment, Teresa did not say anything, nor did she do anything. She just stared at the screen. In the strong light that erased the huge building, the radar of the Son of Danslave was firmly locked on to the 4th and final Freya. As long as this Freya finally hit the target, then this battle would usher in the dawn of the end. At this time, everyone could not help but hold their breath as they looked at the vast expanse of whiteness. Only the target labeled as L4 was quickly falling toward the target. Then, the screen flashed and the label representing L4 disappeared. A brighter purple brilliance burst out from the depths of the sea, breaking through the seawater that was about to completely close, and went straight into the sky, as if it was the dawn that completely expelled the darkness, wantonly declaring its existence. Unknown signal detected. According to the database provided by the Space Administration, it is suspected to be the Senator of Destiny. Further confirmation. Mardukas, when the surrounding sea calms down, immediately launch more detection devices to conduct multiple rounds of detection of the target area. No matter what the data is, it must be strictly and carefully compared with the data provided by the Space Administration. If necessary, don't report to me. Contacting Nana at the capital as soon as possible and try to confirm the survival of the target in the shortest time possible. Teresa's eyes lit up, and she immediately stood up to issue a series of orders. She knew that even if the current situation was not clear, this plan had probably succeeded. The success was such a pleasant surprise. She never thought that Elizabeth would target the Senator of Destiny. Immediately after, an even more abnormal situation occurred. Report. The drone has captured some situations. Now turn to the big screen. As the image on the big screen changed, exclamations sounded again and again. The Beta had self-destructed. The Beta that was wreaking havoc on Paradise Island, regardless of their size, had all self-destructed, leaving only a burst of blood mist drifting with the wind and broken limbs all over the ground. That horrifying scene was both shocking and elicited cheers from the crowd. Teresa finally heaved a sigh of relief when she saw the images of the Betas self-destructing on the spot after switching several angles. Mardukas. It seems at this time, we are just supporting characters. The real protagonist is probably Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth. I feel the same, sir. The blood mist drifting with the wind swept past the trench, the bunker, the remains of the human soldiers who had died bravely in battle, and even swept past between Lancelot's king's sword and Elizabeth, who were confronting each other. Looking at the wisps of blood mist drifting away, Elizabeth turned her head to look at the undulating sea area that had yet to recover from the consecutive explosions of the Four Freya. It seems that it's time to end it. Then, Elizabeth turned her head and looked at Lancelot's king's sword. Sorry, I'm afraid you'll have to accompany me to the end. Knight from another world. Ray Minkai did not open his mouth to respond, but he had already made a response. That was because his response was to use the joystick in his hand and the blade in Lancelot's king's sword's hand as a response. In fact, as his battle with Elizabeth progressed, a strange emotion came from nowhere and gradually seeped into Ray Minkai's heart. That was not a sign of danger, nor was there any existence that was trying to control Ray Minkai. It was also not a sign that the so-called possession of the gods and monsters would occur. Instead, it was emotion that made Ray Minkai feel nostalgic, a kind of sadness that made him empathize with her. Under this kind of emotion, his control skills, the movements of Lancelot's king's sword quietly changed. Every swing of the sword was no longer a skill that Ray Minkai had tempered thousands of times and had already integrated into his instincts. Instead, it was a sword skill that Ray Minkai had never seen or experienced before. Lancelot's king's sword swung out and swung Elizabeth's blade away, forcing her to reveal a flaw. He took the opportunity to take a step forward and raised his sword to stab Elizabeth's heart. Unfortunately, Elizabeth retracted her sword in time to defend and blocked the sword. However, compared to the heart that was almost pierced, Elizabeth was more concerned about the sword that Lancelot's king's sword had swung out. Why do you know this move? That was a sword that existed in Elizabeth's memory. Other than her, no one else would know this sword move, because the person who knew this sword move was already dead. He died on the day his hometown was completely devoured. Facing Elizabeth's question, Ray Minkai did not respond. Or perhaps, he could not respond at all. It was as if he could no longer control his own body. Like a bystander, he watched himself, controlling Lancelot's king's sword to attack Elizabeth with a sword skill that he had never seen before. The first round was over. A picture seemed to appear in front of Ray Minkai's eyes. There, a little girl with a ponytail and an embroidered gold short-sleeve shirt was pointing a wooden sword at the exhausted little boy who had fallen to the ground. She proudly raised her little head and said, "You're not bad. In the name of Elizabeth Amiel, I admit that you are my knight." The fifth round was over. A picture appeared in front of Ray Minkai's eyes again. It was a birthday party that belonged to the little girl when she was 10 years old. At the party, a little boy who was wearing a form-fitting dress but was somewhat reserved was pulled to dance by a little girl who was wearing a gorgeous dress. Looking at the reserved little boy, the little girl said with some resentment that he did not meet her expectations. "Cheer up. You are a knight that I acknowledge. How can you be so timid?" The 10th round was over. What appeared in front of Ray Minkai's eyes again was the little girl. No, it should be the young girl and the young boy when they were 13 years old. After completing the knight trainee exam, the young girl and the young boy who were preparing to go to the border for the trial witnessed the terrible situation of the village being ravaged by the beasts. Under fear and anger, this group of young boys and girls who had just completed the knight trainee exam were hot-headed. They left the barracks without permission and took the initiative to crusade against the beasts. In the end, they returned with a tragic victory. However, the barracks did not blame the young boys and girls, but instead greatly rewarded them. In the night, the young boy witnessed the scene of the young girl who received the reward from the capital, hiding in a corner alone and crying. But the young boy did not take a step forward. He just silently stood not far away, guarding the crying girl. The 20th round was over. Lancelot's king's sword slashed down and cut off Elizabeth's left hand. In the spurting blood, a new picture appeared in front of Ray Minkai's eyes. The setting sun was like blood. The wounded and exhausted soldiers dragged their blood-stained, chipped swords as they stepped on the corpses of their enemies, stepping on puddles of blood as they walked forward. Their broken war flag was fluttering in the wind. Under the war flag, the young girl whose left hand was crippled and could only hang weakly to one side. Her right hand was still dripping with blood, but she was still holding the sword tightly. She was looking forward. Knight, my knight, if I go any further, it will be hell. Will you still follow me? Your Highness, no matter what happens in front, I will follow you to the end, until I die. This time, Ray Minkai heard his answer. The 40th round. Elizabeth's attacks were obviously tired, and Ray Minkai decisively seized the opportunity. He swung his sword at Elizabeth's neck, but she dodged. As the sword flashed, the beautiful scene created by the dancing petals in the sky was displayed in front of Ray Minkai's eyes. It was the scene of a young girl, named Elizabeth Armis, returning to the capital in triumph after unifying the continent for the Empire in the name of the War Princess. Beside the War Princess, who was admired by thousands of people, a determined man in magic armor couldn't help but clench his fists as if he had made an important decision. He admired the War Princess, and he loved Elizabeth Armis even more. In this moment of peace, he didn't want to miss this opportunity. However, before this important decision could be realized, the capital suddenly ignited the flames of war. That night, countless monsters descended from the sky and wreaked havoc everywhere. In an instant, the capital was destroyed, and that man was also stabbed to death by the War Princess, Elizabeth Armis, who he admired. Just like in reality, Lancelot's king's sword raised his left arm and forcefully blocked Elizabeth's sword with a radiation shield. He took the opportunity to pierce through Elizabeth's heart. The moment the cold blade pierced through her heart, Elizabeth's right hand loosened, and she threw away the blade. She took a few steps forward until her right hand rested on the shoulder of Lancelot's king's sword. The strange feeling receded like a tide, and Ray Minkai regained control of his body. He looked up at the screen, at the pair of huge pupils that didn't belong to humans, but at this moment, they revealed human emotions. He already understood. That strange feeling just now belonged to a knight. The emotions and memories of a knight who admired the princess and swore to protect the princess for the rest of his life. Moreover, that it also belonged to him the emotions and memories of him who had the same name in different worlds. It's time to welcome the princess home. The emotions left behind by him were so clear and strong that it pushed Ray Minkai to open the cockpit. He walked out of the cockpit and raised his head to look at the face that was walking towards death. Facing the light wind that took away the last wisp of blood mist, Elizabeth saw the face of the man who walked out of the cockpit of Lancelot's king's sword. You're here, Kai, my knight. Elizabeth's voice trembled, as if she was afraid and looking forward to something. But this was the last. The huge Nidhogg finally reached its limit and turned into ashes that filled the sky, disappearing from this world. Looking at the ashes that flew into the sky with the wind, Ray Minkai heard a voice that responded to Elizabeth's last expectation. My lovely highness, let's go home. Then, the voice sounded again. Thank you. The me in the other world has to be careful of the Black Lion. Chapter 893. The Battle of Paradise Island was over. After paying the price of 3 fleets, all the MS, thousands of armored vehicles, and an uncountable list of casualties, they finally achieved victory. Even though such a victory was not what the humans on Paradise Island wanted, they still managed to get through this crisis. Subsequently, the son of the Dan slave took the initiative to establish contact with the survivors of Paradise Island. Cleaning up the battlefield and sorting out the current situation of Paradise Island entered the agenda. However, these were not important to Ray Minkai. What's wrong? After fighting with that princess, did you hide here and shut yourself in? As the heavy footsteps approached, Ray Minkai felt something on his shoulder. A furry tail dangled on Ray Minkai's back, swaying slightly. The familiar voice was filled with mockery. Is it because you couldn't save the princess? You knight, overflowing plot guy. Hey, hey, let's talk nicely. Don't hit me. Before the white cat Zero could mock Ray Minkai grabbed it by the back of its neck and shook it a few times. Do you not know, or are you pretending not to know? State Zero. What? The white cat Zero quivered, its big eyes rolled around a few times, and its perky ears drooped down. Actually, at the beginning I didn't notice. But halfway through the fight, I noticed something. The white cat Zero struggled a few times, broke free from Ray Minkai's grip, and jumped back onto Ray Minkai's shoulder. Do you still remember what that guy called Lucio went through? Ray Minkai nodded. Yes, I still remember. But I didn't expect that kind of experience to happen to me. Did he say anything else? The white cat Zero suddenly asked. Ray Minkai was silent. After a while, facing the sea breeze, Ray Minkai's voice sounded again. He told me to be careful of the Black Lion. After this battle, the number of Paradise Island's members that could continue to fight had dropped to 20% of their original number. It could even be said that all of Paradise Island's members have been wiped out. Fortunately, the civilians that Jemengard and the others had taken in advance were not affected by the battle. There were no casualties. This could be considered a fortunate outcome in a bitter victory. However, Paradise Island was facing an even more serious problem than Aubrey. Margaret and the others, who had returned to the Paradise Island base, frowned as they looked at the passageway number 1 that had yet to be completely cleaned up. There were still many remains of the beta players and the pungent smell of blood. It seems that after this battle, we don't even have enough people to clean up the mess. Malu smiled bitterly and couldn't help but sigh. At the very least, we've won. Buggy Lulu pressed her hat down and tried not to look at the wreckage scattered in the passage, even though this action had no practical meaning. Victory. However, this victory is only the victory of Small Island. Margaret shook her head. Just as she was about to move on to the command center of Paradise Island, she met a familiar face. It's a pleasure to meet you. Captain Margaret, a tall and beautiful woman, stood in the passageway that was scattered with all kinds of wreckage. She looked at Margaret, Buggy Lulu, and the others with a friendly smile. It's you, Miss Jemengard. Margaret looked at the beautiful woman in surprise. In her memory, this woman should still be in the moon base. Why would she suddenly appear here? In an instant, Margaret remembered the orbital airborne support battle plan of the 8th Fleet. Did you come here during that airborne landing? Jemengard nodded slightly. Yes, it's all thanks to the activity of the Archangel. Otherwise, my men and I wouldn't have completed the orbital airborne landing so smoothly. To be honest, it was a rare experience. After all, they had worked together for a period of time. Margaret did not believe that Jemengard would risk landing on this island that had almost fallen because of the so-called experience. However, the other party did not wait for her to speak and said goodbye. I'm sure Captain Margaret still has a lot of things to deal with. I'll see you later. With that, Jemengard left with his men. It was not until the other party's figure disappeared at the exit of Passage 1 that Margaret caught a glimpse of the key. Nader, looks like we'll have to stay on Earth for some time this time. Captain, you mean we don't need to go back? Even on the Archangel? Maybe, but the Admiral has been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Opportunity? Could it be? With Margaret's reminder, Buggy Lulu immediately figured out why Jemengard would appear here. Maybe. In this world, I'm afraid only that person can make Miss Jemengard so excited. After a pause, Margaret continued. Do you think the 3MS that came to support us just now will appear in the Joint Forces, or even in Zaft? The power that can blow away a large group of monsters with a raise of their hand is probably not the power that we are familiar with. Hearing this, Buggy Lulu also felt that the future was a little bleak. Now that they had lost the Archangel, where should they go? Now, we can only take it one step at a time. After separating from Margaret and the others, the moment Jemengard stepped out of Passage 1, he saw the figure of Lancelot's king's sword. Is it the Lord's new body? Without any hesitation or doubt, the moment he saw Lancelot's king's sword, Jemengard confirmed the existence of that person. Moreover, during the fierce battle, Jemengard had also sent his subordinates to pay attention to the situation on the battlefield. In other words, when the Fong Lion Zero appeared and repelled Doris in one fell swoop, the speculation in Jemengard's heart had already become a reality. You guys stay here, I'll go up alone. Looking left and right at the battlefield that had become extremely empty, Jemengard gave an order and walked towards Lancelot's king's sword alone. Looks like Lux was right. You really came here. Beside Lancelot's king's sword, Ray Minkai said as he looked at Jemengard, who was walking over alone. After Jemengard walked to 1.5 meters in front of Ray Minkai, he bowed and said respectfully and excitedly, "Welcome back, Lord." Seeing this, Ray Minkai smiled and pointed at the son of the pill's slave in the sky. "You should tell that to Lux. She's here too. She's with the son of the pill's slave. Lady Lux is back too. That's really good news." Jemengard revealed a pleasantly surprised expression, but it quickly became a little more serious. "If it's convenient for you now, Lord, there are some things that I must report." Ray Minkai was keenly aware of Jemengard's words. This scheming woman actually called herself a subordinate, which surprised Ray Minkai greatly. After all, in terms of affiliation, Jemengard and even the snake around the Atrium organization were all affiliated with Lux. After pondering for a moment, Ray Minkai nodded. "Speak. There's no one else here." "Yes, Lord." After organizing her words, Jemengard slowly told him what she wanted to report. This matter has to start from the end of the last war, after the appearance of the X1 Rift. X1 Rift? Is it something related to me? "Yes, Lord." Ray Minkai immediately thought of the man who was worshipped by Zaft and Plant as the Holy Lion Knight. "Continue." "Yes." Jemengard continued. After the appearance of the X1 Rift, D, under the urging of Lady Sienna in the official name of Scandinavia, established an exploration department with multiple joint ventures to carry out research on the X1 Rift. During this period, after the first batch of research results were announced, the Alliance and Plant also began to establish relevant departments to carry out research on the X1 Rift. And this is where the problem lies. Jemengard secretly observed Lei Minkai's expression. When he realized that Lei Minkai was only listening carefully to his report, he continued, "That's right. Perhaps because the Alliance didn't pay attention to it, they didn't discover anything other than the research results released by D. However, Plant has made a major discovery." "A major discovery?" Lei Minkai furrowed his brows slightly. This so-called major discovery didn't seem to be anything good. Recalling what Mina had mentioned about Zaft's actions after the X1 Rift crisis, Ray Minkai suddenly wondered if this so-called major discovery was Zaft's, or even that old fox's, foresight. "Yes, this is something that my subordinates capture by chance. At the same time, this is also the result of Plant's major discovery." Jemengard responded and took out a photo from his pocket. Ray Minkai reached out and took a look. His brows suddenly furrowed tightly. Sensing Ray Minkai's abnormality, the silent white cat lying on his shoulder couldn't help but stretch out its small head to look at the photo. Suddenly, the fur all over the white cat's body stood up. In the photo, it was Neku with a huge space and a group of technicians in white coats who were busy. The thing surrounded by this group of technicians was a huge stone statue that was at least 10 meters tall and 20 meters long. Although a considerable portion of the huge stone statue was covered by the canvas, a considerable portion of its head, which was the most important and also the most distinctive part, was still exposed. That was a black lion stone statue. At this moment, whether it was Ray Minkai or the white cat, they both remembered the reminder of Guy before he left. "Me in another world. You have to be careful of the black lion." Chapter 894. Dilindar slowly put down the document in his hand, closed his eyes, and sat quietly in his seat without saying a word. Dilindar only opened his eyes to welcome the visitor when he heard the message from outside. "Sorry, since I'm so busy, I asked you to come here. The visitor was the Holy Lion Knight. After receiving Dilandar's summons, the Holy Lion Knight, who was adjusting the new Guardian of Freedom, immediately rushed to meet Dilandar as soon as possible. No, it's what I should do. President. The Holy Lion Knight responded to Dilandar in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. He then asked, President, is there something wrong with those bugs again? Dilandar first shook his head, then nodded. There is indeed something wrong, but overall it's a good thing. A good thing? The Holy Lion Knight seemed to be stunned for a moment, unable to understand Dilandar's words. Dilandar didn't explain further. He turned around and picked up the document he had been reading from the desk and handed it to the Holy Lion Knight. This is information sent back from a confidential channel not long ago. It's information about Paradise Island and the Minerva. Minerva? The Saint Lion Knight was shocked. He took the document and said, I remember that the Minerva disappeared after the X1 Rift crisis broke out. Zaft sent out search fleets many times, but they couldn't find any trace of it. Yes. Dilandar nodded. After pondering for a moment, he smiled bitterly. There's no doubt that the Minerva went missing. It's just that our direction and train of thought are wrong. The Minerva didn't go missing from the beginning. From the beginning to the end, the Minerva was on a mission to rescue the Deus SD. However, at that time, the Minerva was already misaligned with the time we were in. Space-time misalignment. The Saint Lion Knight's gaze swept across the document, and he quickly read the paragraphs on it. Perhaps this is why we can't find the Minerva no matter what. Then, why would the Minerva appear on Paradise Island? Perhaps there's a reason we don't know. Dilandar shook his head, then walked to the tea table, picked up the empty cup, and gestured to the Holy Lion Knight. Clear water is fine. Speaker. Kai, sometimes you don't have to be so harsh on yourself. You are not an ascetic. Although the Holy Lion Knight asked for water, Dilandar still prepared a cup of fragrant black tea for him. No, this was a special period. There's no need to spend so much money. The Holy Lion Knight looked at the black tea that Dilandal brought over and finally reached out to take it. That's true, but as the speaker, I can still prepare a cup of black tea for you. Tillander chuckled and poured himself a cup of black tea before taking a sip. Yes, not bad. Kai, aren't you going to try it? Hearing this, the Holy Lion Knight picked up the cup, took a sip, and nodded, acknowledging Dilandar's tea brewing skills. As a matter of fact, before this report was submitted, Zaft's intelligence department received an emergency call from Paradise Island. Is it one of us? Based on what the Holy Lion Knight knew, the person who controlled Paradise Island would not initiate contact with Plant, not to mention the urgent contact with their sworn enemy, Zaft. The call only lasted for less than 10 seconds before it was cut off. According to the intelligence department's analysis, Paradise Island was indeed on the verge of collapse at that time. The Minerva entered the fray at that moment. The Holy Lion Knight pondered for a moment before asking, Speaker, you want me to make a trip to Paradise Island? Dilandar waved his hand. No, we don't have to worry about Paradise Island anymore, because the battle there is already over. Although Paradise Island had paid a heavy price, they still won. This time, the Holy Lion Knight didn't try to guess again. Instead, he waited for Dilandar to continue. Our new friends on the moon have sent us a message by chance. Dilandar stood up again and took out another document from the folder on the desk and handed it to the Holy Lion Knight. Britannia Empire. This is a message sent to us by our esteemed Commander Halbarton. After the battle on Paradise Island, Minerva is likely to head to this country for a rest. In other words, it is necessary for Plant to send a diplomatic mission to this country for exchange and rendezvous with the Minerva. Is this my next mission? Speaker. Dilandar smiled and said, The Britannia Empire already has a candidate. Kai, your mission is to go to the moon with me and visit our new friend. The Holy Lion Knight was confused at first, but after he opened the new folder, he understood Dilandar's arrangement. Because other than the Britannia Empire on the moon, not only was there a joint lunar base controlled by Halbarton, but there was also a mysterious country called Fry. from the intelligence. This mysterious country that suddenly appeared was probably an unknown force that suddenly appeared on the moon after the outbreak of the X1 rift. Moreover, it was a country ruled by the royal family. Standing at the very top of the country was Princess Shahnamea Eterna Fra. Below her was the Holy Lion Knight group, led by Granton Gosson, who controlled the country's armed forces, and the civil officials led by Danagorth, who were dedicated to supporting the princess. This was the intelligence from Halbarton. I'm afraid this joint intelligence general wants to drag us down with him, right? The Holy Lion Knight put down the document in his hand and expressed his guess. Maybe, but this is the result I wanted. For us now, the more allies we can recruit, the better. Dilindar put down the teacup in his hand and sighed slightly. The situation on Earth is still unclear, but the situation in the universe is still not optimistic. Even if we have the advantage now, it is only temporary. In this regard, the Holy Lion Knight didn't say anything else. He just stood up silently and saluted Dilindar. The next mission is understood. Speaker, please allow me to leave first. Dilindar nodded slightly. Please, but don't overwork yourself. You are the hope of us, all the citizens of Plant. After watching the Holy Lion Knight leave, Dilindar slowly exhaled, then got up, walked to the desk, and pressed a special communication button. Beep, beep, beep. After a series of bells, the large screen on the wall lit up, showing a scene of many technicians busily working around an object. What's the situation? Dilindar stared at the object that was surrounded by many technicians and asked. Yes, Speaker. We just completed a new round of testing. The result is that we have successfully activated a quarter of the cells in the Holy Lion. A technician with glasses appeared in the screen and responded to Dilindar's question. Duration. Dilindar asked again. 75 seconds. 75 seconds? Far from enough. Did you find out what the problem is? Dilindar knew that a huge amount of energy was needed to activate the Black Lion statue. Even if the energy of the entire colonial satellite was invested in the activation work, it would still be far from enough. For this reason, Dilindar ordered the activation of the Black Lion statue to be classified as top secret and the highest priority. It's still a lack of energy power. In addition, there seem to be other unknown reasons. We are stepping up the investigation. Continue to seize the time. We don't have much time left. Yes, Speaker. Black Lion statue. This was the mysterious object discovered by Plant in the X1 crack before the X1 crack crisis broke out. At the same time, near this mysterious object, the exploration fleet also found a man sleeping in an escape pod. The man was the Holy Lion Knight, Ray Minkai, who was praised and revered by all the citizens of Plant. Although under the cooperation of Plant and Zaft, the citizens of Plant had already recognized his identity. In fact, they were still missing a lion that could create miracles again. Can you make it? Dilindar was silent for a moment. Then he no longer continued to dwell on this issue. He had more important things to deal with. Send someone to inform Miss Lakis. The council has something to ask Lakis to deal with. After listening to the response from the other side of the communication channel, Dilindar nodded. Yes. Also prepare the escort fleet and shuttle. Roger. Mr. Speaker. A pleasant singing voice came from the courtyard where hundreds of flowers were blooming. The young girl, who was surrounded by many lively electronic pets, Harrow, also walked out from the flowers and sat on a chair by the side. She looked up at the orbital elevator that was faintly discernible in the clouds that led to the universe. Mississippi, sorry to disturb your mood. At this time, a girl in a red military uniform with an apologetic expression crossed the flowers, walked to the chair, and said softly, It's okay. I just sang on a whim. The pink girl smiled gently and caught the red Harrow that jumped up. Mayo, what's the matter? I remember that today's public event is over. It's a request from the council. The girl in red paused and tried to put on a serious expression. Council? The pink girl blinked and raised her hand to pat the noisy red Harrow to quiet it down. Go ahead. What did the council? No, what did the speaker say? It's a diplomatic request. According to the reports submitted by Zaf's intelligence department, we have discovered the whereabouts of the Minerva and determined that the Minerva is likely to appear in the Britannia Empire. Therefore, the Council requested Miss Laxkline to visit the Britannia Empire in the name of Plant's diplomatic ambassador and confirm the whereabouts of the Minerva. The Minerva? The pink girl pondered for a moment, then nodded. Okay, I'll accept this request. Chapter 895. Under the leadership of Veretta, the second floating fleet of the Britannia Empire once again acted as a transport brigade and entered the airspace of Paradise Island. At the same time, the floating battleships of the Empire that could fly with only a few light wings gave the survivors of Paradise Island a very good visual lesson. Compared to the Minerva docked at the port that had barely been cleared for use, these airships were much lighter and more elegant. What's more, the floating transport ships that constantly descended from the air and brought the urgently needed supplies of Paradise Island were directly in close contact with the survivors of Paradise Island. This is the floating fleet of the Empire that Miss Gemingard mentioned. This power, I'm afraid, even the original alliance is not as powerful as this. Bucky Lulu stood in the port and looked at the floating transport ships that constantly delivered supplies and took away the wounded. She couldn't help but sigh. Maybe. I heard from Miss Gemingard that the Britannia Empire also has a huge floating fortress. Marlene nodded and then continued. I've already contacted the commander. Due to the sinking of the Archangel, we will pay a friendly visit to the Britannia Empire and express our gratitude for their timely support and assistance in our victory. Bucky Lulu pondered for a moment. Is it a diplomatic mission? But I don't know in what name does the Admiral want us to establish diplomatic relations with the Britannia Empire? After a pause, Bucky Lulu glanced at the direction of the Paradise Island base. You know, only Lieutenant Colonel Phillies is in charge of the base now. It is established in the name of the Earth United Lunar Fleet and the Britannia Empire. This is the Admiral's bottom line. Although Marlene's answer was somewhat beyond Bucky Lulu's expectations, it was reasonable. In the Battle of Paradise Island, all the senior members of the Atlantic Alliance, and even the Blue Persian Chrysanthemum died tragically in the devastation of the Beta. Even if they were lucky enough to avoid the devastation of the Beta, they died in various accidents in the process of trying to escape the base. It seems like a good choice. But will the other party agree with this name? Establishing diplomatic relations with the powerful Imperium in the name of a moon fleet seemed to be a bit of a fantasy, wasn't it? But Margaret seemed to have some confidence. No, the other party would recognize this signboard. After all, this is also the guarantee that Miss Gemingard gave me. At this point, Bujalura didn't have many doubts. At the same time, in the captain's room of the Son of Dan, Newt Gemingard knelt respectfully in front of Lux. The snake that surrounds the atrium, Gemingard, welcomes the return of my master. Get up, Gemingard. Long time no see. Lux reached out to help Gemingard up and carefully sized up this subordinate whom she had not seen for a long time. Long time no see. Lady Lux, you're still so young and beautiful. Really? Sorry for making you laugh. However, the flattery ended here. Lux stopped smiling and said with a serious expression, Gemingard, is there any news from Father? Although we have returned to this world, due to certain circumstances, we have not been able to contact our father. Gemingard nodded and replied, Lady Sienna is still in Scandinavia at the moment. Please be at ease. The European battlefield is still in a relatively balanced state. Those bugs, yes, the Beta that Lord Ray Minkai mentioned, haven't been able to cross the Mediterranean Sea and break through the southern European defense line. And what about Clea? Although her father's safety was guaranteed by Gemingard, Lux still remembered the sister she had taken in, Clea Klein. As for the young lady, she's not on Earth at the moment, but on Plant. At this point, Gemingard seemed to hesitate. But before she could tell the truth, Lux guessed the truth first. Plant. Then the Lux Klein at Plant is Clea, my sister in disguise. The corners of Gemingard's mouth twitched, but in the end, he could only nod silently. After all, this decision back then was really a little unfair to Clea. Ray Minkai raised his hand and patted Lux's shoulder gently to comfort her. No, I'm just a little confused. Why would Clea do such a thing? Lux looked at Ray Minkai apologetically, then looked at Jemingard. Is this Clea's own decision, or is it pressure from the comments? It's the young lady's own decision. After a pause, Jemingard saw that Lux was waiting for an explanation, so he continued. In fact, this happened after the X1 Rift crisis broke out. At that time, after the crisis broke out, Sienna and the young lady were participating in refugee relief activities on the outskirts of Scandinavia's capital when they encountered alien enemies near the outskirts of the capital. Hearing this, Ray Minkai clearly felt Lux's hands clench tightly. Therefore, Ray Minkai reached out and gently patted Lux's hands, then held her hands to comfort her. However, please rest assured, Lady Lux. With the support of the MS squadron led by Captain Mayo, Flying Bird, Lady Sienna and the young lady did not suffer any harm. Wait, Mayo Flying Bird? That little girl? She became an MS pilot? This surprised Ray Minkai. He did not expect that after accidentally saving the Flying Bird's family, the real Flying Bird would run to Zaft and become an MS pilot. Other than that, there was also the double accident of Mayo Flying Bird becoming an MS pilot. Jemingard hesitated again. She understood the source of Ray Minkai's surprise, and she also understood that the source of this surprise was her own decision back then. In fact, this has something to do with my arrangements after the Battle of Yajin Due. After some hesitation, Jemingard still confessed her original arrangements one by one. After personally confirming the return of Ray Minkai and Lux with her own eyes, she could gradually close the net that surrounded the snake of the atrium, and even Jemingard herself. Back then, after I rescued the Flying Bird family from Ob, I settled them in Scandinavia in the name of refugees from a friendly country until the Battle of Yajin Due. At the same time, I secretly observed this family during this period of time. Listening to Jemingard's narration, Ray Minkai suddenly felt that his unintentional words back then had probably become the key to a major turning point in someone's life in Jemingard's hands. You found out. Jemingard nodded, and a bright light rose in her eyes. That was the light of exploration that discovered something. From the trajectory of their actions, the Flying Bird family looks like an ordinary family on the surface. But in reality, the real Flying Bird siblings have some kind of power, a power hidden in the depths of their genes. The real Flying Bird siblings? See, the so-called genetic power was no stranger to Lux. In a sense, she was also the holder of Seed. Yes, Seed. This was the ultimate form of the path that Dr. Xiang had focused on back then. Of course, this is a little far-fetched. Jemingard smiled, and then returned to the topic at hand. After our multiple inspections, we confirmed that the real Flying Bird siblings had the potential to become Seed. Therefore, during the post-war reconstruction of Plant, I noticed certain things and made corresponding arrangements according to the situation. During this period, the real Flying Bird was sent to Plant as an Ob refugee. This is based on the personal will of the real Flying Bird. Although he felt that Jemingard would not force others to do something, Ray Minkai still wanted to confirm it. This is the personal will of the real Flying Bird. Of course, this is indeed a very difficult thing for a little girl who is not even 16 years old. Therefore, we have also made the corresponding compensation. Flying Bird's parents gave her the greatest amount of work based on her own talent, and at the same time, they gave her the highest priority. Mayo Flying Bird, on the other hand, was taken good care of by the King family of Scandinavia as the personal maid of Christina Klein, the young lady. Hearing Jemingard's arrangement, Lei Minkai and Lux looked at each other and couldn't help but nod. Indeed, Jemingard's arrangements were indeed impeccable. For an ordinary family like Fei Niao, this treatment was already beyond the scope of compensation. However, the development later on was a bit off. So, Mayo Flying Bird is also by Christina's side now. Ray Minkai raised this question. Yes, Mayo's talent is outstanding. In the past few years, she has completed various rigorous examinations, including the royal family's etiquette, higher education courses, combat skills, and even MS manipulation courses. Under the unanimous request of many teachers, she passed the graduation exam with the best results. It seemed that I was wrong. Ray Minkai shook his head and felt a little helpless. No one would have thought that this girl, who had died early in the war, would turn out to be a top student. Now, is there a way to contact Father? Originally, Lux wanted to contact Christina, but thinking that this might expose Christina's identity, she could only give up in the end. No, currently, the European battlefield is still shrouded by an unknown source of interference. We can only rely on the laser antenna of the lunar base to contact Scandinavia at certain times. It seemed to be to comfort Lux, and at the same time to reveal his subsequent arrangements. Jemengard said with a serious expression, "In the next few days, Plant will send a diplomatic team with Lux Klein as the diplomatic ambassador for a diplomatic visit to the Britannia Empire. At the same time, it's also to welcome back the Minerva, right?" Jemengard. Although this news was surprising, Ray Minkai immediately understood the deeper meaning. That old fox, Dylandal, would not decisively send a diplomatic team to visit the Britannia Empire because of the sudden appearance of the Britannia Empire. In the end, it was because of the Minerva that had been missing for a long time. No, on a deeper level, it was because of the existence of Talia Karates. It seems that Sir has already guessed the chairman's arrangement. Originally, this chairman was very likely to visit the Britannia Empire as soon as possible, but the situation has changed. The situation has changed. Ray Minkai pondered for a moment. The reason why Dylandal gave up on personally welcoming the Minerva was probably because the situation in the universe had changed. And this situation might affect Plant and even himself. Is it the moon? Yes. When we were performing an orbital airborne mission, a mysterious country called Free suddenly appeared near the lunar base. Although they didn't have much contact, Commander Halbarton still had a hunch that the lunar base alone couldn't resist the power of this mysterious country. Free. After thinking for a while, Ray Minkai finally remembered the real identity of Free. It seems that after dealing with the matters on Earth, we have to take a trip to the universe. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.